Chapter 391. Fang Qishao had defeated Yan Fian of the Yunu Palace in 3 moves. This was no longer a one-sided suppression, but a battle between 2 people of different levels. Mr. Lu of the Phaseless Demon sect had a serious look in his eyes. There were crouching tigers and hidden dragons in the righteous sects, and they were indeed stronger than the diabolism. Mr. Lu himself had already reached the realm of half-step Grandmaster. As long as he was given an opportunity, he was confident that he could immediately step into the realm of martial arts Grandmaster. However, if Mr. Lu were to fight with Fang Qishao now, he was not confident that he could defeat Fang Qishao. On the other hand, on the side of the diabolism, Chu Xiu of the Yinma clan was not bad, but Chu Xiu was only at the realm of 5 Qis collecting in origin, and had not reached the realm of oneness of heaven and man. Mr. Lu did not know if Chu Xiu could defeat Fang Qishao. There was also Yi Tianxia of the Bright Demon clan. He had refined the inner elixir of the Blood Flood Dragon and successfully cultivated the Heart Sutra of the Blood Flood Dragon as a human. He was not easy to deal with, but he had not reached the realm of oneness of heaven and man. The martial artists of diabolism were on the wane. People like Chu Xiu and Yi Tianxia were already considered to be at the top. However, when looking at the righteous sects, especially the Taoist and Buddhist sects, both Zhang Qingjin and Zhong Xian were outstanding figures that were hard to come by in 1,000 years. Compared to them, the disadvantage of diabolism was really not small. At this time, Wei Shia, who was standing next to Mr. Lu, seemed to have sensed his thoughts. He transmitted his voice, "Lu Jin, don't be so pessimistic. No orthodoxy can always be strong. The general trend of the world has its ups and downs. Because of the rise of the Kunlun devil cult, our diabolism has been glorious for hundreds of years. Although we are now at a low point, who dares to say that we will always be at a low point? As long as the diabolism is not destroyed, there will always be a chance for us to rise again. Since ancient times, the only orthodoxies that could truly stand at the pinnacle were Taoism, Buddhism, and devil. Now, this bunch of swordsmen want to stir up trouble when they see that our devil Tao is on the decline. They are still far from it." Mr. Lu nodded. Perhaps it was precisely because there were countless people like Wei Shia in the diabolism that they could continue to survive in this environment where the diabolism was suppressed to the extreme. In the past, Prince Anil had once asked Mr. Lu, "The Kunlun devil cult has been destroyed for hundreds of years. What's the point of persisting in these things?" At that time, Mr. Lu did not answer. Perhaps to Mr. Lu and the current Phaseless Demon sect, their loyalty was not to the Kunlun devil cult, but to the flourishing age of the devil path. At that moment, in the arena, the match between Fang Qishao and Yan Fian had ended. Everyone was looking at Chu Xiu and Nie Donglu. The truly interesting match was between these two. Chu Xiu and Nie Donglu could be said to be old rivals and enemies. The grudge between them was recorded on the Longhu leaderboard. It was not something that happened in a day or two. However, Nie Donglu and Chu Xiu never saw each other again. However, the grudge between them had not been put down. Nie Donglu became famous at a young age. He was also a person with great luck. His father, Nie Renlong, had left a strong reputation for him. Just the reputation of the morgue was enough for him to benefit from. After that, Nie Donglu became the disciple of the Northern Yan martial arts tycoon, Han Baxian, and received all the teachings of Han Baxian. With the teachings of 2 martial arts masters on the Wind Cloud leaderboard, it could be considered as making up for some of the shortcomings in his own strength. On the other hand, Chu Xiu's experience was even more legendary. From a wandering martial artist to a ruthless killer of the Blue Dragon Society, he then entered the Guanzhong torture room and became the Guanxi penal officer in a short period of time. He held great power in his hands. This kind of resume was enough to look down on the entire Jianghu. So overall, Chu Xiu and Nie Donglio's growth was completely different. One was the standard elite of an aristocratic family, and had a genius history of growing up with great luck. On the other hand, Chu Xiu had a standard background in the wilderness. With a sword and a saber, he had fought his way through a storm of blood to reach his current realm and achievements. It was hard to say who was stronger between the two, but because of the grudge between Nie Donglu and Chu Xiu, the two would have to fight it out in the end. This also made the people present a little excited, and they were ready to watch a good show. In fact, now that Fang Qixiao was fully deserving of the first place, it didn't matter who was second or third. If it were someone else, it might just be a spar and be done with it. But now that it was Chu Xiu and Nie Donglu, with the grudge between them, it was obviously not so easy to settle. Nie Donglu looked at Chu Xiu and said with a smile, "Brother Chu, you just went through a few big battles. Do you want to rest for a while? Don't worry, I won't take advantage of you." As he said that, Nie Donglu stretched out his hand and pointed, making a magnanimous gesture. The grudge between Chu Xiu and Nie Donglu had long been formed, but in reality, he hadn't had many interactions with Nie Donglu. However, regardless of whether it was Chu Xiu or Nie Donglu, they had all heard a lot about each other from others. Chu Xiu's evaluation of Nie Donglu was very simple: he was a scheming person. Even an ordinary sentence from him usually contained several meanings. Just like now, Nie Donglu had asked Chu Xiu to rest on the surface, but under the current situation, could Chu Xiu really rest? Fang Qixiao had already smoothly dealt with Yan Fian. Only Chu Xiu was left to fight with Nie Donglu again. There were so many warriors on floating Jade Mountain watching, and there were also martial arts masters from various sects waiting at the side. Could a junior warrior like Chu Xiu really go to the side to rest and recover his vital qi before making a move? There were so many people watching him. Chu Xiu recover his strength alone? Even if Chu Xiu was thick-skinned enough to ignore the gazes of these people and recover his vital qi, people would still label Chu Xiu as a timid and cautious person. Although it wasn't a derogatory term, it was still not something good. If Chu Xiu couldn't take the provocation and made a move now, it would be in line with Nie Donglio's intentions. He was a hypocrite, but he was also a real villain. Han Ba first taught him that the easiest way to solve problems was to solve them with one's own fists. His father, Nie Renlong, also taught him that the winner takes all. As long as you can defeat your enemy, using any means is reasonable. Nie Donglu didn't have the confidence to win against Chu Xiu at his peak, but now that he was facing Chu Xiu, who had expended a lot of energy, Nie Donglu still had some confidence. In any case, no matter what Chu Xiu chose, Nie Donglu would be the one to benefit. Looking at Nie Donglu, Chu Xiu said lightly, "Nie Donglu, you're still the same. Although you've become Han Ba's disciple, you haven't learned his domineering ways." Nie Donglu smiled and said, "Domineering ways? I don't need that kind of thing for now. My master walks the path of dominance, and I walk the path of the king. Can't I?" Chu Xiu laughed coldly when he heard that. Nie Donglu, you really are full of yourself. Walk the path of the king? You're just a young master of the Memorial Hall. Do you still think you're a Northern Yen prince? Nie Donglio's words were indeed arrogant. The Memorial Hall's strength wasn't considered the top among the people and the 6 gangs, yet he still dared to say he wanted to walk the path of the king? Do the nobles and generals have guts? Nie Donglu stood with his hands behind his back and said lightly, "Chu Xiu, you were born in the wilderness, and now you don't even have the courage to do so." Chu Xiu raised the sky demon dance in his hand and pointed it at Nie Donglu. He said in a deep voice, "That's not bad. However, between the two of us, you are the one who looks more like a king. Don't you think that's a little inauspicious?" Nie Renlong was a standard peasant, but Nie Donglu wasn't. The young master of the Memorial Hall was not a peasant, no matter where he was. Of course, Chu Xiu couldn't be bothered to waste time with Nie Donglu. Since Nie Donglu believed in his so-called way of the king, then Chu Xiu would teach him a lesson. Whether it was the way of the king or the way of dominance, it all had to be carried out with one's fists and the knife in one's hand. Demonic aura gathered on the sky demon dance. The demonic aura was so dense that it had even condensed into the shadow of a demon god on the blade, making people feel abnormally terrified. Seeing this, Han Tingyi and the other people from the 5 major sword sects frowned. It was not because of anything else, but because Chu Xiu's demonic art was too eye-catching. In fact, there was nothing strange about demonic arts. In Jianghu, the martial arts of Taoism, Buddhism, and diabolism were the most widely spread, especially the martial arts of diabolism. Although there were flaws such as rapid learning, unstable foundation, and excessive killing, the power of demonic arts was very strong, especially when used as a trump card when fighting for one's life. Therefore, even some righteous martial artists actually secretly practiced demonic arts as a trump card. However, this was the World Sword Sect Conference, and the goal of the 5 major sword sects was to target the demonic arts. Now that Chu Xiu revealed his demonic arts, they couldn't help but be sensitive. If Chu Xiu didn't come from the Guanzhong torture room, had a clean background, and had so many Buddhist techniques, Chu Xiu would have been invited to have tea by now. At this moment, Chu Xiu's devil saber had slashed down, and the fiend god's image that had been condensed from his saber's aura had warped as well. Along with Chu Xiu's saber, a wave of sonic booms resounded. The devil saber that was born from the hell of Avicii had been utilized to its limits by Chu Xiu, and a form of divinity had even appeared when his saber descended. In the face of Chu Xiu's stunning blade, Nie Donglu didn't block it directly. Instead, he retreated first, preparing to use it to hold Chu Xiu back. Chu Xiu's only advantage was his own combat power. However, Chu Xiu's previous battles with the Great Light Temple's martial artists had exhausted nearly half of his inner strength. Nie Donglu didn't believe that Chu Xiu could still control such a powerful explosive power. Therefore, he planned to hold it back until Chu Xiu was truly exhausted. Unfortunately, Chu Xiu's moves were always quick. If Nie Donglu wanted to hold Chu Xiu back, he would have to see if he had enough strength. When Chu Xiu's blade fell, the vital energy defense Nie Donglu set up was like paper in front of Chu Xiu. It was easily torn apart by Chu Xiu's blade. At this moment, Nie Donglu stretched out a hand and pressed it directly on Chu Xiu's long blade. Earth energy exploded, and the demonic flames were instantly extinguished. Memorial Manor's secret technique, Heaven and Earth Cloud Hand. Chapter 392. Although Nie Donglu had a great reputation in the Jianghu, he had not really fought many times. He had always been famous for his scheming, which was why he was ranked in the top 10 of the Longhu leaderboard. Now, after years of painstaking cultivation and becoming Han Baxian's disciple, everyone finally saw Nie Donglu's true strength. Heaven and earth above the clouds, grasping the world. The powerful palm power rippled out layer by layer, tearing apart the demonic aura on Chu Xiu's heavenly demon dance and attacking Chu Xiu along the blade. Chu Xiu raised his eyebrows. Nie Donglu's accumulated strength was not weak, and the gathering loyalty Manor's secret heaven and earth above the clouds hand was really strange. It grasped the universe, and any gang chi power that was caught by the heaven and earth above the clouds hand would be torn apart by the strange ripples. However, in terms of pure strength, Chu Xiu had never been afraid of anyone. The boundless demonic aura on the heavenly demon dance combined with the demonic aura, and Chu Xiu's eyes also turned red in an instant. In an instant, Chu Xiu had already stepped into the state of selflessness. Demonic aura shot up to the sky, and demonic flames swept out. The long blade broke free from Nie Donglu's grasp, and with a surging momentum, it slashed at Nie Donglu. The boundless demonic aura combined with the demonic aura condensed into a hideous shadow of a demon god around Chu Xiu. As Chu Xiu's blade slashed down, it let out a shrill wail of evil spirits. Nie Donglu's figure retreated quickly, and his expression changed slightly. The reason why he had the confidence to fight Chu Xiu was because Chu Xiu had previously gone through the Temple of Great Light's continuous battles against several 5 Chi's origin realm experts who were not weak. He had already expended a large portion of his inner energy. But who would have thought that Chu Xiu would still be able to unleash such a level of power? Just how deep was Chu Xiu's accumulation? Nie Donglu's hands danced in succession. The heaven and earth cloud-reaching hands, which had originally seemed fierce and imposing, now became profound and soft. Yin and Yang, the two extremes of Yin and Yang, the heaven and earth, the two completely different powers fluctuated between Nie Donglu's hands, dividing and cancelling out Chu Xiu's violent saber force. However, at this moment, the killing intent in Chu Xiu's eyes receded and a mysterious aura appeared around him. The trajectory of Nie Donglio's heaven and earth cloud hand was within Chu Xiu's grasp. Heaven's sun gazing at air. In the past, Chu Xiu could not use the heaven's sun gazing at air in such an intense fight. But recently, although Chu Xiu's cultivation of the heaven's sun gazing at air had not improved, he had become much more familiar with it. Just like now, he could concentrate his mental strength to the extreme in battle and use the heaven's sun gazing at air. The heaven and earth cloud hand, a secret technique passed down in honor manner, was very strange. It could be both hard and soft. Just like just now, it could shatter Chu Xiu's blade power head-on. Now, it could split heaven and earth and block Chu Xiu's evil blood blade power. However, in the eyes of Chu Xiu's heaven's sun gazing at air, Nie Donglio's next attack trajectory was already clear to him. Chu Xiu's blade power slowed down, but it was no longer continuous like a violent storm. Instead, he stared at the trajectory of Nie Donglio's attack. The moment Nie Donglio's heaven and earth cloud hand was about to be used, he blocked his opponent's attack trajectory and completely disrupted his rhythm. After more than 10 strikes, Nie Donglio's heaven and earth cloud hand's trajectory had been completely disrupted by Chu Xiu. This made him so frustrated that he almost vomited blood. Every move of his actually seemed to be taking the initiative to collide with Chu Xiu's saber intent. He was completely unable to execute the heaven and earth cloud reaching hands formation. This kind of situation was simply strange to the extreme. It was just like how his father had fed him moves when they were sparring in battle. If one didn't cultivate the heaven and earth cloud reaching hand to the extreme, it was simply impossible to do this. However, Nie Donglu was certain that the Nie family's heaven and earth cloud hand would never be leaked. Tribute Village's heaven and earth cloud hand was created by Nie Renlong based on some ancient techniques he had obtained in the past. In the entire Tribute Village, only he and his father Nie Renlong knew of it, so there was absolutely no possibility of the secret being leaked. Nie Donglu did not know what was going on with Chu Xiu. However, seeing that Chu Xiu's blade power was getting stronger and stronger, and the blade power was getting fiercer and fiercer, constantly approaching him, Nie Donglu snorted. His body suddenly exploded with a blinding golden light, as if the sun had descended upon him. He punched out, illuminating the world. The Northern Yen martial arts tycoon Han Baxian practiced the vast Yang 9 Extremes mysterious skill, which could be considered a half-self-created martial art. In the past, Han Baxian first practiced the body-refining skill that he had exchanged with the Northern Yen imperial court. However, Han Baxian later became obsessed with martial arts and combined the 9 body-refining skills that he had obtained from various places. After they were combined, it became the vast Yang 9 Extremes mysterious skill. The vast Yang 9 Extremes mysterious skill was ferocious and domineering. It was not only a body-refining skill, but also a mysterious skill that accumulated a lot of inner strength. Moreover, Han Baxian had also integrated his own martial arts moves into it, making it even more powerful when used together. Previously, Han Baxian used weapons. He was from the Northern Yen military, so he naturally used heavy weapons. He had used guns, halberd, and even the green dragon crescent blade. However, Han Baxian later discovered that no weapon was as practical as his pair of iron fists. He gave up on weapons and used his fists to fight his enemies. However, he also integrated his use of weapons into the vast Yang 9 Extremes mysterious skill, just like the punch that Nie Donglu threw. The light of the vast Yang sun shrouded him, but in reality, it was a heavy hammer. It was heavy and powerful, with infinite power. The dazzling light collided with Chu Xiu's blade. The light of the vast Yang scorching sun burst out in an instant, eventually tangling with the devil qi and dissipating. Violent gang qi burst out, and even the ring shook twice. That was not all. Nie Donglio's figure did not stop at all. He stood straight and threw a punch. It was like a straight spear, bursting forth with unparalleled momentum. Its speed was extremely fast, and it was also extremely ferocious. Seeing Nie Donglio's actions, Chu Xiu's lips curled into a cold smile. Did Nie Donglu want to fight in close combat with him? Unfortunately, ever since Chu Xiu cultivated the great Vajra divine powers, He no longer had any weaknesses. Even in close combat, Chu Xiu's accumulated inner force and the physical strength brought by the great Vajra divine powers were no weaker than Nie Donglu, who cultivated the vast Yang Nine Extremes' mysterious skill. He sheathed his blade and formed a seal. Among the complicated hand seals, majestic Gang Qi spread out. The Wisdom Fist seal, useless in heaven and earth. The area within a radius of more than 30 meters became Chu Xiu's Gang Qi domain. Nie Donglio's punch crashed into the Gang Qi domain, like a spear piercing into sticky water, its momentum waning again and again. The spear focused on momentum, and after piercing out, it moved forward with indomitable will. However, under Chu Xiu's Wisdom Fist seal, this momentum had already dissipated, and its power was reduced by half. Stepping forward, Chu Xiu formed a complete Aquarius seal in his hand. In an instant, a dazzling light burst out and collided with Nie Donglio's punch, instantly forcing him to take a step back. Stepping forward again, Chu Xiu formed a Sun Will seal in his hand. The 5 elements rotated into one, growing and multiplying endlessly. A powerful Gang Qi burst out, forcing Nie Donglu to take another step back. Chu Xiu's body was surrounded by golden Buddhist light. One after another, Buddhist mudras landed. Their power was incomparably ferocious. They were actually suppressing Nie Donglu. The power was several times stronger than when Nie Donglu had unleashed the vast Yang Nine Extremes' mysterious skill. Everyone present had a strange look on their faces. Nie Donglu was looking for trouble. After all, Chu Xiu had fought several times in the Jianghu, and everyone knew a little about his martial arts. When it came to power, there were few warriors of the same level who could compare with Chu Xiu. Of course, Nie Donglu could only blame his bad luck. He had finally become Han Baxian's disciple and raised his cultivation to the extreme. He did not expect to meet such a monster like Chu Xiu. Even after fighting several battles, he could still burst out with power of this level. Some of the monks from the Great Light Temple below also had ugly expressions, because that was how Chu Xiu had treated them previously. He had unleashed a barrage of attacks without any reason, completely crushing them in terms of power. He had completely overwhelmed them and finally blasted them off the arena. However, Nie Donglu was obviously not one of those monks from the Great Light Temple. After being suppressed by Chu Xiu for several moves, Nie Donglio's eyes revealed a cold look. He had underestimated Chu Xiu this time. After not seeing him for so long, his luck was not bad, but Chu Xiu's growth was even more terrifying. If this continued, he was afraid that before he could exhaust Chu Xiu to death, he would be crushed and defeated by Chu Xiu in public. It was not that Nie Donglu could not accept failure. In fact, he had lost many times in his life. Previously, he lost to a woman, and he was even ridiculed by the warriors of the Northern Yen for a long time. But now, in the World Sword Sect Conference, under the watchful eyes of everyone, if he was crushed and defeated by Chu Xiu like this, it would be a huge blow to Nie Donglio's reputation. So at this moment, Nie Donglu had already made up his mind to fight. Victory or defeat was right in front of him. Although he was full of schemes, he would not hesitate after calculating. Instead, he was extremely decisive. Since he had decided to fight, he no longer worried about being injured or holding back. Before Chu Xiu's fist landed, a blood mist rose around Nie Donglio's body. He had actually burned his blood essence, which made everyone's eyebrows twitch. Burning blood essence, a method that hurt others and oneself, was usually only used when it came to a life-or-death situation. Now that Nie Donglu had even used this method in the ring, it was obvious that he was really angry and had been forced to the extreme. Han Ting, who was the referee on the high platform, wanted to intervene when he saw this scene. However, he resisted the urge. Anyway, it was already the last 2 rounds. If they wanted to fight, then let them fight. Anyway, it did not affect the overall situation. The goal of the 5 major sword sects was diabolism, not to be a mediator between these junior warriors. Chapter 393. Seeing that Nie Donglu was even willing to burn his blood essence, Chu Xiu could not help but frown and take 2 steps back. Nie Donglio's desire to win was not ordinary. It was just a competition in the ring, and Han Tingyi and the others were watching. He could not really kill anyone, so why would he risk his life? Of course, for Chu Xiu, he still had the chance to kill someone, but not now, but in the future. But now that Nie Donglu had decided to go all out, how could he let Chu Xiu leave so easily? Thick blood essence gathered in Nie Donglio's arms. He pointed out with his fingers, and in an instant, 2 blood swords slashed out. But the strangest thing was that the 2 blood swords were wrapped in a thick layer of golden vigor. The 2 blood swords were like 2 dragons, twisting agilely and tearing apart all the vigor around Chu Xiu as they slashed towards him. The 2 blood swords condensed from Nie Donglio's blood essence and vigor were not strange, but they could be said to be magical. Even if Chu Xiu attacked with all his might, he would not be able to completely block them. The vigor was torn apart by the 2 blood swords. Chu Xiu held the Dugu seal in his hand, unmoving like a mountain, and invincible. When the 2 blood swords collided with the Dugu seal, blood essence exploded and golden light filled the air, directly shattering Chu Xiu's Dugu seal. Nie Donglio's face was pale, but his speed did not change in the slightest. Just as Chu Xiu's Dugu seal was shattered, he had already closed in. Actually, the 2 blood swords were not taught to him by Han Baxian, nor was it taught by his father, Nie Renlong. It was an incomplete sword technique that Nie Donglu accidentally obtained. This sword technique originated from the Devil Dao, and the power of the complete version was unimaginable. After Nie Donglu accidentally obtained this sword technique, he gave it to his father, Nie Renlong. In the end, Nie Renlong came to the conclusion that the owner of this sword technique should have been from the Kunlun devil cult. It was very likely that he was a devil emissary or even a devil lord of the Kunlun devil cult. However, the damage to the sword technique was too great. Even if Nie Renlong had taken action, he could only extract this move from it. Using one's vital energy and blood as the marrow, essential energy as the bones, and astral energy as the skin, the power of these 2 swords were extremely powerful. Even Chu Xiu's Dugu Yin would not be able to withstand an attack of this level. Nie Donglu stepped on a golden light, and his entire body was covered in a powerful vigor. When he punched, his aura was raised to the extreme, as if it had the power to shatter a mountain. In the beginning, Nie Donglu had wanted to exhaust Chu Xiu to death. After all, Chu Xiu had already used up a lot of energy. However, in the end, Nie Donglu realized that Chu Xiu had accumulated a terrifying amount of energy. Even after the consecutive battles, Chu Xiu's accumulation was even more profound than his. So, if they continued fighting like this, it would not be Chu Xiu who would be exhausted to death, but Nie Donglu himself. So, Nie Donglu could only change his strategy. He attacked with all his strength and unleashed his greatest power to defeat Chu Xiu. Looking at Nie Donglu, who was like a god descending to the world, Chu Xiu's eyes turned red. The Dugu seal had been shattered. Although the power of the 2 blood swords had been mostly neutralized, there was still a portion of the power that had seeped into Chu Xiu's internal organs, causing his meridians to feel some pain. But at this moment, Chu Xiu had already stepped into the selfless killing realm. Killing intent and baleful aura condensed around him, and things like pain were directly ignored by Chu Xiu. There was only a single word in his mind: kill. As he punched out, the murderous aura around Chu Xiu condensed into a crimson color. It was so red that it shone brightly and was a dazzling red. Forgetting heaven, forgetting earth, forgetting heaven, forgetting killing fist. The punch, condensed to the extreme, collided with Nie Donglu. When the 2 fists collided, a terrifying wave erupted. The faces of the other cultivators turned pale as well. It was not because of the aura that erupted when the 2 of them exchanged blows, but because of the terrifying killing intent from Chu Xiu's annihilating heaven and earth extinguishing oblivion killing fist. The forgetting heaven, forgetting killing fist was very famous in the Jianghu. It was not just 1 or 2 people who practiced it. Many warriors in the Eastern Qi military had actually practiced this martial art. However, those people were all powerful warriors in the military. It was easy for them to condense this level of killing intent in battle and then use this martial art. But Chu Xiu was different. He was just a Jianghu man, and he came from a Jianghu background. Only God knew how he could condense this level of killing intent. If Chu Xiu had not represented the Guanzhong torture room, he would not have felt the slightest bit out of place if someone called him a devil. At that moment, in the arena, Nie Dongliu's punch, which could be said to be the pinnacle of power, was blocked by Chu Xiu. This made Nie Donglu gnash his teeth in hatred. Whether or not Chu Xiu's strength was exhausted aside, Nie Donglu himself had expended a lot of energy. Despite going all out, Nie Donglu was unable to shake Chu Xiu, and this was only because he had taken advantage of Chu Xiu's perilous state. Even after Chu Xiu had been taken on in succession, he was still powerless. This made Nie Donglu feel helpless. He finally understood what his master, Han Baxian, meant. In the face of absolute power, everything else was nothing. Even though he was full of schemes, he still lost in the end. Nie Donglu was not a sore loser. In fact, he was very rational. After feeling that he could not beat Chu Xiu even if he used his last trump card, Nie Donglu immediately prepared to retreat. Unfortunately, Chu Xiu did not want to give him this chance. The moment Nie Donglu retreated, Chu Xiu moved as well. However, Chu Xiu did not move. He formed a seal with his hands, and as his fingers tapped, there was an explosion of thunder. Outer Lion's Seal. It was like the roar of thunder. Nie Donglu was not prepared at all, and his earth energy dissipated by Chu Xiu's Outer Lion's Seal. Blood flowed from his ears. However, the Outer Lion's Seal had a limited effect on Nie Donglu. After all, his physical cultivation was still there. After cultivating the vast Yang 9 Extreme's mysterious skill, his physical strength still had a certain degree of defense against martial arts like the Outer Lion's Seal. But before Nie Donglu could react, Chu Xiu's eyes had already turned into a bottomless abyss, pulling Nie Dongliu's entire mind into it. Extinguishing sky, destroying earth, soul-shifting technique. Secret mental techniques were definitely a minority type in the Jianghu, and those that were related to them were all described as evil and ruthless. Chu Xiu's martial arts had always been firm, fierce, and imposing. Now, he had suddenly used a mental secret technique. Not only did Nie Donglu not react, but everyone present also did not react in time. Originally, with Nie Dongliu's physical cultivation and strong qi and blood, he still had a certain degree of resistance against secret mental techniques. However, he had used a secret technique to burn his blood essence, causing his blood essence to be depleted. Now, he was hit in an instant. His mind fell into a bottomless abyss. Nie Donglu struggled with all his might, and his mental strength was almost stretched to the limit. However, just as he broke free from the influence of the soul-shifting skill, what greeted him was a punch from Chu Xiu. It was the annihilating heaven and earth-destroying oblivion-killing fist with infinite murderous intent. Han Tingyi frowned. They could really fight in the ring, but they could not allow anyone to die. So, he was already prepared to stop them. However, Nie Donglu still had the strength to fight. At the critical moment, he directly exploded all his Gang Qi, condensing it into a shield in front of him. The golden Gang Qi shield was directly shattered by Chu Xiu's punch, and Nie Donglu was also blasted off the ring by Chu Xiu's punch. He spat out large mouthfuls of blood, but his life was clearly not in danger. Seeing this, Han Tingyi did not continue to attack. Looking at Chu Xiu, who was panting a little but not too injured in the ring, Nie Dongliu's heart was filled with unwillingness, but he still wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth and returned to his seat. He was not someone who could not afford to lose. At this moment, Nie Donglu also understood that he was still the young master of the Memorial Manor, but Chu Xiu was no longer the Chu Xiu of the past. In the past, Nie Dongliu's strength was superior to Chu Xiu's, but now, he was crushed by Chu Xiu even though he had resorted to trickery. He had lost completely. At that time, Chu Xiu had no backing. He was just a lone cultivator that Nie Donglu could casually crush to death. Now, Chu Xiu had the support of the Guanzhong torture room and had become the Guanzhong penal officer with great power. Although his status was still not as high as the heir of the memorial manor, he was not someone he could casually crush. After all, in terms of power, the Guanzhong torture room was much stronger than the memorial manor. Of course, what Nie Donglu did not know was that Chu Xiu had more than just the Guanzhong torture room behind him. The power hidden beneath was something that Nie Donglu did not even dare to think about. Of course, Nie Donglu also regretted not forcing his father to use the power of the memorial manor to kill Chu Xiu. However, regret was the most useless emotion. This emotion only flashed in Nie Dongliu's heart for a moment before he forcibly extinguished it. No one present was surprised that Chu Xiu had defeated Nie Donglu. On the contrary, to most people, this was a very normal thing. To the people of the Jianghu, the reason why Chu Xiu was able to make a name for himself on the Longhu list was because he had fought through many bloody battles. The people of the Jianghu could say that Chu Xiu was vicious, and that he was ruthless. However, no one would say that Chu Xiu did not live up to his reputation and was not worthy of his ranking on the Longhu list. This was a kind of confidence, a confidence obtained from countless bloody battles and slaughters. On the other hand, Nie Dongliu's reputation was actually not weaker than Chu Xiu's. In fact, it was even greater than Chu Xiu's. After all, Chu Xiu was only the penal officer of Guangdong, and not the definite successor of the Guanzhong torture room. However, everyone in the Jianghu knew that Nie Donglu was the successor of the memorial manor. As long as Nie Donglu did not die, he would definitely take over the memorial manor in the future. Therefore, Nie Donglu actually had the halo of the entire memorial manor. Without this identity, Nie Dongliu's reputation would definitely be far inferior to Chu Xiu's. Now that the two of them were fighting, most people had already expected that the winner would most likely be Chu Xiu. Now that they looked at it, it was just as they had expected. Now that the arena had reached this stage, it was more or less enough. With Fang Qixiao's strength and realm, he fully deserved to be number 1. Chu Xiu was number 2, and Nie Donglu was number 3. There was no need to continue fighting. Chu Xiu could also go down and heal his injuries now. Therefore, Han Tingyi just asked a routine question, Chu Xiu, do you still want to fight? Just when everyone thought that Chu Xiu would definitely take the initiative to admit defeat, Chu Xiu suddenly said, of course I want to fight. Why wouldn't I? I don't have the habit of admitting defeat. Fang Qixiao, who was standing at the side, said helplessly, Brother Chu, you still want to fight when you are already in this state. Don't tell me that you and that woman from the Yu Palace are also. Pfft. Like a fairy, why are you talking about the dignity of a swordsman? Besides, you are using a saber, not a sword. Chapter 394. Fang Qixiao's words made all the saber-wielding martial artists very unhappy. A swordsman needed dignity, but a saber wielder did not. However, as the matter stood, what Fang Qixiao said did make some sense. Now, not to mention that Chu Xiu had overexerted himself, even if Chu Xiu recovered to his peak, he would still not be able to defeat Fang Qixiao. Since that was the case, what was the point of continuing to pester him? Looking at Fang Qixiao, Chu Xiu said indifferently, dignity is something that you fight for yourself, not something that you can just talk about. The only reason I want to fight again is because I'm not used to admitting defeat. Seeing that Chu Xiu was so insistent, Fang Qixiao shrugged and said indifferently, as long as you're happy. Although he was too lazy to make a move, Fang Qixiao felt that it would not take long to finish off Chu Xiu. Based on Chu Xiu's current state, he might be able to finish off Chu Xiu in less than 3 moves. However, although Fang Qixiao was a little unreliable, he was still a kind person. Before he made a move, he specially asked, do you need to recover your strength? Chu Xiu shook his head and said, no need, this is enough. Fang Qixiao shrugged and said, all right, I won't stand on ceremony then. As he said that, Fang Qixiao's hand was already on his sword. At the same time, Fang Qixiao's seemingly mischievous expression turned serious. Fang Qixiao was a very split person. His usual state and the state he was in when he held his sword were two different people. Fang Qixiao had seen the power of Chu Xiu's attack just now. He had to admit that Chu Xiu was indeed not weak, but that was all. There was a big realm difference between them, and Chu Xiu could not beat him. However, even if Fang Qixiao was confident that he could defeat Chu Xiu, even if Chu Xiu had consumed most of his strength, Fang Qixiao still had to show his serious attitude when facing an opponent like Chu Xiu. If Fang Qixiao was not serious, he would probably lose face in front of Chu Xiu. The seemingly ordinary sword in Fang Qixiao's hand was unsheathed and stabbed out. The karma rotated. His person, his sword, and Chu Xiu seemed to have a strange connection. It was extremely magical. As soon as the fight started, Fang Qixiao used the strongest karma swordsmanship that he could master. He also planned to end the battle with Chu Xiu quickly and then go back to rest. This move was not a sword technique, but had risen to the level of swordsmanship. Therefore, except for martial Dao masters, the people below could not understand it. Although they also felt that Fang Qixiao was somewhat mysterious, it was obvious to them that the current Fang Qixiao was not as powerful as when he fought with Yan Fian, where the sword aura spanned more than 30 meters and swept away everything. At this time, in the face of Fang Qixiao's sword, Chu Xiu's eyes revealed a faint excitement. Although Chu Xiu knew that he was no match for Fang Qixiao, he insisted on fighting Fang Qixiao. He did it for the sake of Fang Qixiao's sword. Chu Xiu's mental strength rose to the extreme, and even his eyes became extremely empty. If one looked closely, one could even see the sun, moon, and stars rotating in Chu Xiu's eyes. The heaven's sun gazing at air skill was performed to the extreme by Chu Xiu. Ordinary people only saw the sword that Fang Qixiao stabbed out casually, but what Chu Xiu saw was the powerful karma power. Fang Qixiao's swordsmanship had an effect first, and then there would be a cause. This was a sword that was almost certain to hit its target. Other than forcefully resisting it, no one could break it. Even the grandmasters of swordsmanship in the past had never heard of such a strange swordsmanship. Only God knew how Fang Qixiao had comprehended it. However, Chu Xiu's heaven's sun gazing at air skill was the opposite of Fang Qixiao's swordsmanship. What he saw was the cause, and what he effected was the effect. Even if it was a sword that was certain to hit its target, Chu Xiu could see the trajectory of the sword, and then he could predict whether to dodge or counterattack. It could be said that what Chu Xiu saw with the heaven's sun gazing at air skill was the future, and it could be considered a type of karma. Therefore, when Fang Qixiao stabbed out with his sword, Chu Xiu suddenly took a step in a direction. It was this step that made Fang Qixiao's body stop abruptly, and a look of horror appeared in his eyes. His karma had been disrupted. He could not stab Chu Xiu with this sword. Ever since Fang Qixiao had successfully comprehended the karma sword principle, even the grandmasters of swordsmanship in Sword King's city had been full of praise for him. If they were in his shoes, they would not know how to break it apart from forcefully resisting it. Now, Fang Qixiao did not know whether his karma sword principle had been broken by Chu Xiu or not. In any case, it had been disrupted. If he forcefully attacked again, it would be considered a real failure. Fang Qixiao had a rare look of seriousness on his face. He had thought that he would be able to deal with Chu Xiu with a single sword strike, but he had not expected to encounter such a strange thing. The long sword in his hand changed its trajectory, and the karma changed. On the other side, Chu Xiu also took a step forward and changed his karma again. The two of them changed their trajectories back and forth. In the eyes of everyone present, Fang Qixiao and Chu Xiu seemed to be fooling around. One person's sword momentum was slow, and he would stop midway, while the other person was simply walking around in the arena. However, they did not know that Chu Xiu and Fang Qixiao's mental strength had been stretched to the extreme. The change in karma was a competition of their understanding of their own martial path and the strength of their mental strength. Chu Xiu had insisted on attacking Fang Qixiao for this scene. From the moment Fang Qixiao had used the karma sword principle to defeat Yan Fian, Chu Xiu had already had a plan. His heaven's sun gazing at air skill was extremely difficult to cultivate, and he could not even make progress in closed-door training. He could only hone it through killing. However, even so, the progress of the heaven's sun gazing at air skill was very slow. That was until Chu Xiu saw Fang Qixiao's karma sword principle, which was actually somewhat similar to the heaven's sun gazing at air skill. They were both related to karma, so Chu Xiu wanted to use Fang Qixiao's karma sword principle to hone his own power. As it turned out, Chu Xiu was right. Every time Fang Qixiao changed the trajectory of his sword, Chu Xiu had to exert all his mental strength to perform the heaven's sun gazing at air skill. Under such pressure, although his mental strength was stretched to the extreme, the cultivation of the heaven's sun gazing at air skill improved visibly under the pressure. At this moment, the other martial Dao masters present revealed a hint of shock in their eyes. They had long known that Fang Qixiao was talented, so they were not surprised that Fang Qixiao displayed such a cultivation level. Now that Chu Xiu was also good at martial arts related to karma, he could even fight Fang Qixiao to such a stalemate. Although they knew that the current Chu Xiu was definitely not Fang Qixiao's match, it was clear that Chu Xiu had the potential to catch up to Fang Qixiao's level. On the high platform, Qing Tingshan from the Hidden Sword Villa said sourly, "Guanzhong torture room is really lucky. There are almost many talents in the past few generations. First, there was Chu Kuang's song that shook the Jianghu, and then there was Guan Siyu who turned the tide. This generation has Chu Xiu. This Guanzhong torture hall is really lucky." Among the 5 major sword sects, only the Hidden Sword Villa and the Yunu Palace had weak potential. The Yunu Palace was weak because they only accepted female disciples, and the Jianghu was dominated by men. Therefore, it could be said that the Yunu Palace excluded 80% of the Jianghu people. Moreover, the Yunu swordplay codex itself was also an unstable factor. As for the Hidden Sword Villa, the reason was even simpler. Although there were outsiders in the Hidden Sword Villa, the Qing clan had always been in charge of the villa. It was almost like an aristocratic family. As a result, the Hidden Sword Villa's secret techniques, as well as some of their treasured swords, could only be used by the Qing family. Even if outsiders were powerful, the Qing family would not be at ease to hand over the techniques and weapons to them. The Sword King City's martial Dao master suppressed his surprise and said indifferently, "So what if he's lucky? Potential doesn't equal strength." Fang Qixiao won this round, and Fang Qixiao will continue to win in the future. Although Chu Xiu has potential, he can't threaten Fang Qixiao of Sword King City. Qing Tingshan sneered and did not say anything. Although he did not like Sword King City, he would not say anything under such circumstances. After all, Fang Qixiao was a member of the 5 major sword sects, while Chu Xiu was a member of Guanzhong torture room. Even if the 5 major sword sects had conflicts with each other, they still had to unite against outsiders. At this time, Fang Qixiao had changed his sword 9 times in a row, but he did not manage to stab all 9 times before Chu Xiu's heaven's sun gazing at air saw through him. In the end, Fang Qixiao had no choice but to withdraw his sword. At this time, Chu Xiu's mental energy was almost at its limit. When he saw that Fang Qixiao still wanted to change his sword stance, Chu Xiu said directly, "There's no need to fight. I admit defeat." Everyone present was stunned. That's it? The two of them took a few steps forward inexplicably, and Chu Xiu admitted defeat without even making a move? Didn't you say that you're not used to admitting defeat? Why do you say it so skillfully now? But no matter what, the warriors below the stage were all dumbfounded, completely unable to make heads or tails of what was going on. Fang Qixiao put the long sword in his hand back on his back and glared at Chu Xiu fiercely. "So you're using me as your whetstone? I even wanted to treat you to a meal. Now, you should be the one treating me." Although Fang Qixiao was a little unruly, he was not an idiot. On the contrary, Fang Qixiao was very smart. When they were fighting just now, he was focused on the sword principle, so he did not notice it. It was only when Chu Xiu admitted defeat while sweating profusely that Fang Qixiao realized that although he had won this round, he had been tricked by Chu Xiu and helped him hone his martial arts. Winning or losing didn't matter to Chu Xiu from the beginning. Therefore, he was ungrateful and insisted on fighting with Fang Qishao. He wanted to use Fang Qishao to hone his heaven's sun gazing at air cultivation. Hearing this, Chu Xiu smiled and said, "It's not a problem to have a meal together, but I'm guessing that your seniors in Sword King City don't want us to be together. Moreover, it's also a problem if you can come out after returning to Sword King City. That fellow who I don't know if he's your senior brother or martial uncle will definitely report you." Chapter 395. In the battle with Fang Qishao, Chu Xiu seemed to have lost, but in fact, he had gained something. The heaven's sun gazing at air could only have an obvious breakthrough under this kind of pressure. If Fang Qishao was willing to be Chu Xiu's sparring partner, Chu Xiu was even confident that he could cultivate the heaven's sun gazing at air to a proficient level in a short period of time. But obviously, this was not going to happen. Now, Fang Qishao was already very unhappy. Although he had won in the end, he felt like he had suffered a loss. After the younger generation's arena competition was over, the prizes were not distributed on the spot. Instead, they were going to be distributed to everyone after the World Sword Sect Conference ended. Next, it was time for the martial Dao masters to spar with each other. Everyone was excited about it. After all, for most of the warriors present, it was very difficult for them to see martial arts grandmaster level experts fight. Even if they could not understand it, as long as they saw it, it would be enough for them to brag for a long time. Han Tingyi and the other people from the 5 major sword sects looked at each other. They walked down the high platform at the same time and stood in the arena. Everyone present instantly started discussing in low voices when they saw these people. These people were all renowned grandmasters of the sword Dao from the 5 major sword sections. The beautiful woman in palace attire from the Yunu Palace was the current palace master of the Yunu Palace, Moon Shadow Star Mark Lin Fengya. Although she was not famous in the martial arts world, she was not small either. Of course, her fame was mostly because of her identity as the palace master of the Yunu Palace. Lin Fengya was ranked 25th on the honor list. Her ranking was even higher than Han Tingyi in the Sword Hut. But in reality, the people of the martial arts world also knew that Lin Fengya's ranking on the honor list was actually somewhat high. With her strength, it was difficult for her to even enter the top 30. Now, she was ranked 25th because of her identity as the palace master of the Yunu Palace. More importantly, it was because she was one of the few women on the honor list that her ranking was so high. The martial artist with 7 swords on his back was the master of the hidden sword villa, Heartless Sword Tomb, Qing Tingshan. He originally carried 10 swords, but the other 3 had been broken. He had broken 3 swords and killed 3 people. Of the 3 people who had died, one was a murderer who had become sworn enemies with the hidden sword villa in the past, while the other 2 were powerful figures of the demonic Dao. Qing Tingshan's strength was not weak among the martial Dao masters. However, the hidden sword villa had been on the decline recently, and Qing Tingshan was not a woman, so naturally, he did not receive any preferential treatment. Therefore, he was only ranked 33rd on the honor roll, not even in the top 30. The white-robed warrior from Sword King City was the first seat of Sword King City's Xingjian Hall, Formless Sword Bai Qian. He was ranked 30th on the Wind Cloud list, second only to Han Tingyi of the Sword Hut. Among the 4 major sword halls of Sword King City, the Xingjian Hall specialized in sword techniques. However, Bai Qian had already transformed his sword techniques into a realm where incorporeal triumphed over corporeal, so his nickname was Formless Sword. From this, one could see Bai Qian's terrifying cultivation in the way of the sword. The last person was the white-robed, barefooted young man with a broken sword mark on his forehead from the Wind Cloud Sword Tomb. In fact, among the 5 martial Dao masters, he had the most powerful background. The Wind Cloud Sword Tomb was a place where swords were hidden. Legend had it that in ancient times, when some sword Dao masters were on the verge of death, they would bury their swords in a place. That place was the Wind Cloud Sword Tomb according to the customs of the Jianghu. The swords of the sword Dao masters were definitely extremely precious weapons, or even divine weapons. Therefore, the disciples or servants of the Sword Dao Masters would spontaneously build huts around the Wind Cloud Sword Tomb to protect the divine weapons and treasured swords in the tomb. Later on, as the number of people guarding the Wind Cloud Sword Tomb increased, their descendants also multiplied, and they joined together to form a Sword Dao sect. It could be said that the Wind Cloud Sword Tomb was the inheritance of countless Sword Dao Masters in the past. It could be said that the Wind Cloud Sword Tomb was the strongest among the 5 major sword sects. Moreover, even if the Wind Cloud Sword Tomb's experts of a certain generation withered, no one dared to provoke it, because no one knew what kind of mysterious or evil existence Wind Cloud Sword Tomb would invite from the place where swords were hidden. Legend had it that the Wind Cloud Sword Tomb suffered a blow more than 2,000 years ago. The entire Wind Cloud Sword Tomb was left with an old martial Dao master. Therefore, an enemy sect came to the Wind Cloud Sword Tomb. The enemy had 6 martial Dao masters, and the sect's experts gathered, wanting to completely destroy the Wind Cloud Sword Tomb. In the end, the old martial Dao master used his own blood as a sacrifice to invite a sword spirit that was formed from the Wind Cloud Sword Tomb's countless killing intents. It actually slaughtered the 6 martial Dao masters. Although the martial Dao master of the Wind Cloud Sword Tomb exhausted his blood and passed away in less than 3 days, it also let the entire underworld know that the Wind Cloud Sword Tomb was not to be trifled with. Even if there was only one person left, no one knew what other trump cards he had. The white-clothed barefooted young man had a very mysterious origin. Legend had it that outsiders couldn't enter the Wind Cloud Sword Tomb's land of buried swords. To be precise, only warriors with chi could enter. As long as they approached, they would trigger the formation. Because the land of buried swords was connected to a barren forest, a wild wolf entered the land of buried swords with a baby boy in its mouth. It threw the baby boy next to a broken sword and fed him with wolf milk every day. The baby boy didn't cry or make a fuss. He was only discovered by the people of the Wind Cloud Sword Tomb when he was 3 years old. For a time, the entire Wind Cloud Sword Tomb was shaken. For some reason, the baby boy seemed to have formed a strange connection with the broken sword beside him. The broken sword's spirit had dissipated, and a new spirit was born, turning it into a new god weapon. Later, the baby was raised by the Wind Cloud Sword Tomb and accepted as a disciple. Even the deceased previous leader of the Wind Cloud Sword Tomb, the old sword god Guemo, took him as a disciple and taught him swordsmanship. Because he didn't have parents and didn't even know what his surname was, Guemo named him Yanji because the broken sword that accompanied him was called Yanji. Yanji also became the most special existence in the Wind Cloud Sword Tomb. He was born with a god weapon, and that god weapon was connected to his flesh and blood. When he cultivated to the unity of heaven and man realm, the god weapon could fuse with his body. No matter how long he lived, he could guarantee that he wouldn't age. It was very miraculous. Yanji was ranked 23rd on the Wind Cloud Sword Tomb, but everyone in the underworld said that Yanji's ranking was definitely higher than that. He didn't fight many times, but every time he did, he would easily defeat his opponents. Under the broken sword, there was no one who survived. Among the 5 people present, Yanji could be said to be the strongest and the most unfathomable. If there were no accidents, the champion of this arena competition should be Yanji. However, although the 5 of them were going to compete on the arena, those who were familiar with the inside story knew that they were just putting on a show for the Devil Dao. The good fortune heavenly demon flag didn't have much meaning to the 5 great sword sects. They wouldn't fight to the death for this thing. The only goal of the 5 of them going on the arena was to lure the Devil Dao to attack. Han Tingyi said to everyone present in a deep voice, "Everyone, the second round has begun. I will first show my incompetence. Our 5 great sword sects will exchange pointers with each other, so we won't waste time with one-on-one games. The 5 of us will fight together to determine the winner." As he spoke, Han Tingyi and the other 4 began to fight, immediately attracting the attention of everyone present. It was indeed rare to see 5 sword masters fight, but Chu Xiu only took a few glances before losing interest. These people were really acting. They weren't paying attention at all. Although the 5 of them fought with sword chi and astral energy, in reality, the 5 of them didn't even use 10% of their power. Han Tingyi didn't use the powerful sword intent of the sword hut at all. Cheng Tingshan only used one of his 7 swords, and he didn't use the white submerged invisible sword either. Instead, he used many sword moves that looked gorgeous but were just for show. Lin Fengya was the same. She didn't use the natural power of the Yu Maiden swordplay. It wasn't even as good as Yan Fian's previous attack. The one who was the most outrageous was Yan Ji. Everyone wanted to see how he would fuse the Yan Ji sword into his body. In the end, he did not even draw his sword. He condensed his true qi and used his sword fingers to attack. It was really outrageous. Of course, for the wandering martial artists, Han Tingyi and the others were already fighting fiercely enough. They enjoyed watching. After about 2 hours of chaotic fighting, the 5 of them finally decided the winner. The final winner was actually Cheng Tingshan of the Hidden Sword Villa. Seeing this result, everyone present curled their lips. They really didn't pay attention. How could such a result come out? However, the people from the 5 major sword sects didn't care about the discussions below. Han Tingyi cupped his hands and said, "Everyone, the outcome of our 5 major sword sect spar has been decided. Villa Master Cheng of the Hidden Sword Villa has deep attainments in the way of the sword and is ahead of us. Is there anyone else who wants to come up and spar? The winner can take away the demonic creation flag." The martial arts masters below all raised their eyebrows, but no one said a word. They all knew that this time, the people from the 5 major sword sects wanted to lure out the people from the demonic path. They didn't object to this, but they also couldn't be bothered to get involved. So naturally, no one spoke at this time. However, at this time, a hoarse old voice came from below. "Can your 5 major sword sects act any more fake? This kid from the Hidden Sword Villa has no attainments in the way of the sword. He carries so many swords all day like a peacock spreading its tail. Doesn't he know that the more cocky a person is, the faster they die? Who is 10 Directions Divine Sword Ching Nanbei to you? Is he your grandfather or your great-grandfather? That old guy also likes to carry 10 swords on his back and run around in the pugilistic world. In the end, I broke his neck and broke 9 of his swords. The remaining one looked good, so I made it into a door bolt. It's still hanging on the door of my cottage." Chapter 396. As the hoarse, old voice rang out, a young man in white with a jade-like face walked out from the crowd, gently fanning himself with a folding fan. However, his steps did not seem like that of a young man, but more like that of an old man. Han Tingyi and the others immediately became serious. He was finally here. However, Cheng Tingshan's expression was ugly because this man was insulting their Hidden Sword Mountain Villa. Cheng Nanbei was not his grandfather, nor was he his great-grandfather. Instead, he was an ancestor of the Hidden Sword Mountain Villa's Cheng clan. He was someone of the same generation as his great-grandfather, but he was killed by the demonic Dao in his early years. However, that was more than 200 years ago, and Cheng Tingshan was only in his 50s. At that time, even his father hadn't been born yet. Cheng Tingshan had only occasionally seen a description of it in the family tree. How could he remember it so clearly? However, this man in front of him said that he was the one who killed his ancestor. Didn't that mean that this man had lived for at least 200 years? Who was this man? Cheng Tingshan thought about it and suddenly thought of something. He suddenly shouted in shock, "Jade-face heavenly demon! You're Jade-face heavenly demon Wuxia. You're not dead yet." As soon as this was said, the crowd immediately went into an uproar. Although more than 200 years had passed, the reputation of the 9 Mountains' 5 great demons was still very famous. Wuxia twisted his neck. His appearance changed from that of a handsome young man to that of an old man with a face full of wrinkles. "Tsk tisk, it's not easy. I didn't expect someone to still remember me. It seems that your Hidden Sword Mountain Villa still holds a grudge. Could it be that you've been thinking about how to kill me all these years?" Han Tingyi and the others all frowned. It seemed that they had really provoked the demonic Dao this time. Even an old demonic Dao monster like Wuxia had come out. On the other side, Qing Tingshan's eyes revealed a hint of coldness. He said, "The people of my Hidden Sword Mountain Villa will not die in vain. All these years, my Hidden Sword Mountain Villa did not make a move because we thought you were dead. I didn't expect you to still be alive. However, it's a pity that you could have continued to live for a while. In the end, you voluntarily jumped out to die. You can't blame me for this." As soon as he finished speaking, the 5 longswords behind Qing Tingshan were unsheathed at the same time. Violent earth energy gathered on the swords, forming a sword formation that enveloped Wuxia. At the same time, Qing Tingshan held a long sword in each of his hands. He used 2 sword techniques at the same time and attacked Wuxia. In the past, the 9 Mountains' 5 great sky fiends were indeed famous. Even the Hidden Sword Villa's ancestor had died at Wuxia's hands. However, when Qing Tingshan faced Wuxia, he was still confident that he could defeat him. The reason was simple. Wuxia was old. In the Jianghu, it was not the case that the older one was, the stronger one would be. If that was the case, then everyone should stop fighting and find a place to go into seclusion. Let's see who lived the longest and who would be the king of the Jianghu. No matter how arrogant you were in the pugilistic world, you couldn't resist the ravages of time. Qing Tingshan was only in his 50s at the moment. For a martial Dao master, he was in the prime of his life, when his qi and blood were at their strongest. What about Wuxia? He was already old, completely old. In fact, even if Wuxia didn't attack him after a while, he would probably die of old age. There was no need for Qing Tingshan to be afraid of such an old thing with declining qi and blood. However, before his sword formation could land, he saw Wuxia yawn lightly. However, this yawn was like a demonic sound piercing through the ears. A huge sound wave suddenly erupted, taking away one's soul. Almost in the blink of an eye, the sword formation that Qing Tingshan had set up was completely destroyed. Qing Tingshan's eyes revealed a look of horror. This old thing was already more than 200 years old. How could he still be so powerful? However, before he could react, he saw Wuxia stretch out a hand and suddenly press down. In an instant, the surrounding qi of heaven and earth all turned into monstrous demonic qi, condensing into a giant hand that was hundreds of feet long. It was like a mountain with 5 fingers, crushing down on Qing Tingshan. Demonic devouring myriad worlds, sky-covering palm. Before the palm energy landed, Qing Tingshan had already spat out a mouthful of blood from the terrifying pressure. A few days ago at the Bone Tree Villa, Wuxia had also attacked Mountain Ghost. However, Mountain Ghost was a member of the moon-worshipping cult after all. The bright demons and the hidden demons were still preparing to join forces. Of course, they would not fall out with each other. Therefore, Wuxia still held back when he attacked. He only taught Mountain Ghost a little and did not go all out. However, it was different against Qing Tingshan now. Wuxia was going to kill him. At that moment, Qing Tingshan looked at the giant demonic qi hand in shock and said hoarsely, "True fire spirit refinement. You actually broke through to the true fire spirit refinement." It was not easy to step into the martial Dao Grandmaster realm, but breaking through to the true fire spirit refinement was even more difficult. Back when Wuxia was still at his peak, he had not even reached the true fire spirit refinement. Now that Wuxia was old and had basically no chance of advancing further, how did he reach his current realm? However, there was no time for Qing Tingshan to think at this moment. If the palm landed, he would probably be seriously injured even if he did not die. At that moment, Han Tingyi and the others who were standing behind Qing Tingshan also came to his rescue in time. After all, they were all standing on the same side. Han Tingyi unsheathed the long sword in his hand with one hand. The seemingly ordinary redwood scabbard hid a dazzling long sword, the vacant sword. As Han Tingyi unsheathed the vacant sword in his hand, all the power in the world condensed into sword momentum and met Wuxia's palm. At that moment, he slashed out with his sword, which was also the world. The white-clothed, barefooted Yan Ji extended his index finger and pointed it between his eyebrows. The golden broken sword mark shone brightly, and a golden broken sword materialized from illusion and emerged from within Yan Ji's body. As he pointed his finger forward, the broken sword whizzed towards the demonic palm in midair. However, the golden broken sword was surrounded by a terrifyingly powerful sword aura. It extended for dozens of feet and its power was incomparably great. A loud noise was heard, and Han Tingyi and the other two took a step back. The three of them worked together and barely managed to block Wei Shiya's palm. One could imagine how terrifying Wei Shiya was at that moment. Looking at those people, Wei Shiya's old face revealed a cold expression. The juniors are useless. They can't even withstand a single blow. To the others present, Han Tingyi and the others were seniors in the pugilistic world and unattainable martial Dao masters. However, to an old antique like Wei Shiya, they were genuine juniors. After all, when he was dominating the pugilistic world, these people were not even born yet. However, at that moment, a majestic voice suddenly sounded. Wei Shiya, you said that they can't withstand a single blow. How about I do it now? I heard that you have the best relationship with the Crimson Blood Demon among the 5 sky fiends of 9th Sky Mountain. I didn't believe it at first. When I destroyed 9th Sky Mountain, I wanted to kill you. However, the Crimson Blood Demon risked his life to stop me. He didn't retreat even after I killed 9 of his blood goo avatars. In the end, I shattered his heart meridian with my sword and bought you time to escape. Otherwise, do you think you would still be alive today? Do you think you can show off your power in front of the 5 major sword sects? The Crimson Blood Demon used his life to buy you a chance to live, but you didn't cherish it. What? Have you finally lived enough? As the voice faded, an old man in a golden python robe walked down from the high platform. He had a long sword hanging from his waist, which was as red as fire. What was shocking was that his feet were completely suspended in the air, as if there were invisible steps below him. This move was called the Sky Suspension Ladder. In fact, most warriors at the unity of heaven and man realm could do it. They used their spiritual chi to temporarily support their body, which would create such a mysterious effect. However, this old man was different. No one could sense a trace of spiritual chi fluctuations from his body. Every time he took a step, the power of heaven and earth automatically flowed into his feet, providing him with support. It was simply terrifying. All the cultivators below were dumbfounded. Who was this person? However, from the tone of this person, it was obvious that he was an older expert from the same generation as Wei Shiya. He had participated in the battle to kill the 5 sky demons of the 9 Heavens Mountain and had even killed a sky demon. Among the young warriors present, they naturally paid attention to the Longhu list. They had naturally heard of the Fengyun list, but they really didn't know much about these things that happened hundreds of years ago. However, grandmasters like Xiahozhen were very familiar with the matters of the Jianghu. Almost instantly, they guessed the identity of this old man. They said in shock, "It's the king of Jiannan, Du Li." Du Li's nickname was the king of Jiannan. This king was not an honorific title like Sword Venerable or Sword Saint. He was indeed a king in the past. 200 years ago, other than the northern Yan, western Chu, and eastern Qi, there were some small countries, such as the Wei Kingdom, which was the predecessor of the Wei County. Du Li was a king in the state of Liang. He was even the elder brother of the emperor of the state of Liang. Back then, Du Li was actually the crown prince of the state of Liang. However, he was obsessed with swordsmanship. He gave up the position of crown prince to his younger brother and became an idle king to practice swordsmanship. He even traveled to Jianghu to seek advice from swordsmanship experts. Later on, Du Li joined the Sword King's city to practice swordsmanship in seclusion. He was once the first seat of the Sword King's city's combat sword hall. Later on, he became an elder of the Sword King's city. However, after the state of Liang was destroyed by the northern Yan, Du Li became a loner. He even went to the northern Yan royal family to seek revenge. He single-handedly slaughtered the northern Yan army, one of the 5 armies of the state of northern Yan. He killed several generals of the northern Yan army. In the end, he was seriously injured by an expert of the Northern Yan army and fled. Duguli was quite famous 200 years ago. One could even say that he was a fanatic. If it was anyone else, even if their own country was destroyed by the Northern Yan, they wouldn't have the guts to challenge the Northern Yan dynasty. Even if the entire Sword King's city came, it would be useless. However, Duguli dared to single-handedly kill his way to the Northern Yan kingdom to seek revenge. Not many people had this kind of courage. Chapter 397. The 5 great sword sects had planned for a long time for today's battle. They were not afraid of the people from the demonic path coming. They were only afraid that the demonic path would not come. Thus, the 5 great sword sects had brought out their true trump cards. There was more than one person like Duguli. Following Duguli's appearance, 2 more figures descended from the sky. One of them was dressed in a green Confucian robe. He had the appearance of a refined and handsome middle-aged man. A bamboo flute hung from his left waist and a green short sword hung from his right. His every movement seemed to blend into the surroundings and gave off a very strange feeling of nature. Seeing this person, everyone present did not need to guess. This person was the leader of the Forgetful Sword Hut, the Xiaoxiang Sword Rain, Shen Baochen, who was ranked 5th on the Wind and Cloud list. He was also a genius who had stunned the Jianghu. Legend had it that Shen Baochen started learning the sword at the age of 10. Every time he reached a new realm, he would challenge warriors 1 realm higher than him. Before reaching the Unity of Heaven realm, Shen Baochen had challenged warriors from the Forgetful Sword Hut. After reaching the Unity of Heaven realm, Shen Baochen had actually challenged a famous grandmaster of the sword in the Jianghu. He had crossed a large realm and defeated him. He had even made the grandmaster break his own sword and admit that he was not as good as Shen Baochen. It could be said that ever since Shen Baochen had stepped into the Jianghu, he had only done 2 things, cultivate and challenge. Shen Baochen rarely fought, but when he did, he would not lose. Those who had been defeated by Shen Baochen had said that Shen Baochen's sword was a sword that made people despair. Compared to Shen Baochen, the other person was someone that the people present could not see through. It was an unkempt old man. He wore a gray robe and the original color could not be seen. His hair and beard were also white and messy. His figure was bent and one of his eyes seemed to be blind. He only held a dirty long sword in his hand. His original appearance could not be seen. In other places, no one would even look at such an old man. But here, this old man did not seem out of place when he stood next to Duguli and Shen Baochen. His aura was as terrifying as an abyss. This time, even Xiahou Zhen, a martial Dao Grand Master, could not recognize him. However, Shudu, who had always been lazy, suddenly said, "This old man is an old man guarding the Storm Sword Tomb. It doesn't matter what his name is. Anyway, in this generation, there is only one heir, and they have been guarding the sword vault for generations, never leaving it even an inch. The last time he left Windcloud Sword Mound, it was because the demonic path's overlord, Demon Lord 9 Yin Zhaoyang, that old lunatic's actions were too crazy. He killed people without restraint in the martial world, and even a few elites from the Great Light Temple and Windcloud Sword Mound died in his hands. At that time, senior brother Su Yun went with this old fellow. Senior brother Su Yun told us that he didn't make a move. Only this old fellow made a move. After that, Yin Zhaoyang died without a complete corpse. Hearing this, everyone present gasped. The way they looked at the sloppy old man instantly changed. They had never heard of the Storm Sword Mound's tomb keeper, but they knew about Demon Lord 9 Yin Zhaoyang. He was a demonic path overlord from 100 years ago. He had the cultivation of spiritual cultivation with true fire, and he had once dominated the martial world. However, in his later years, there seemed to be some problems with the martial arts he cultivated, and there was something wrong with his brain. He crazily slaughtered the elites of the martial world and used their heart blood to refine medicine in order to extend his lifespan. It was extremely difficult to extend one's lifespan. Using the so-called heart blood to extend one's lifespan sounded unreliable, but but at that time, Yin Zhaoyang had completely gone crazy and caused quite a stir in the martial world. However, no one knew when Yin Zhaoyang had suddenly disappeared without a trace. It was only now that everyone knew that Yin Zhaoyang had died in the hands of this unremarkable old man. In that case, didn't this person have already reached spiritual cultivation with true fire 100 years ago? The way everyone looked at the 5 major sword sects changed slightly. The 5 major sword sects were really going to play it big this time. Jiannan King, Duguli, the sect master of the Forgetful Sword Hut, Shen Baochen, and the Storm Sword Mound's Tomb Keeper were all experts among experts at spiritual cultivation with true fire. The demonic path was probably going to be in trouble this time. However, before anyone could react, Wuxia said coldly, "Don't hold it in anymore. Show yourself when you're ready." Wuxia's voice did not sound loud, but it seemed to spread throughout the entire floating jade mountain. As Wuxia's voice fell, a series of battle cries came from the foot of floating jade mountain. Demonic chi and murderous intent surged, instantly surrounding the entire floating jade mountain. Dozens of disciples in charge of guarding the gate at the foot of the mountain ran up in a panic. As they ran, they shouted, "This is bad. The demonic path has surrounded the entire floating jade mountain." As the warrior's voice fell, countless demonic path warriors surged up from all directions. These people were from the moon-worshipping sect, the evil Zenith sect, the 5 Venoms sect, and the other sections. They were all warriors from the bright demon lineage. Among these warriors, the moon-worshipping sect had the most people. After all, in the eyes of most demonic path warriors, the moon-worshipping sect represented the number 1 sect of the demonic path. Among the group of people from the moon-worshipping sect, a man shrouded in a black robe stepped through the air. He stepped through the crowd and stood beside Wuxia. This mysterious black-robed man wore a golden jade dragon crown on his head. His black robe was also embroidered with strange golden runes. He stood with his hands behind his back, and an ancient and desolate aura emanated from him. It's the East Monarch Tai of the moon-worshipping sect's 9 great god magi. Everyone's expressions changed slightly. This person was definitely one of the top 3 figures in the moon-worshipping sect. The ranking of the moon-worshipping sect had always been based on the sect leader, the high priest, and the saintess. The 9 great divine magispriests could only be ranked behind them. However, this generation's saintess was still young and had yet to mature. Eastern Emperor Tai's strength could be said to be amazing. He was even able to compete with the high priest in the moon-worshipping sect. Therefore, his status was probably the highest among all the Eastern Emperor Tai's in history. At this time, on the moon-worshipping sect side, a woman shrouded in a black veil was dancing. Her figure was graceful and exquisite. Although her face was also covered by a black veil, it could not hide her extremely charming charm. However, although her dance was beautiful, the things under her feet made people's scalps go numb. They were densely packed, and countless goo insects danced to her rhythm. Moon-worshipping sect saintess. Everyone present almost instantly recognized this woman's identity. Among the 4 great beauties of the martial arts world, the righteous path had Yan Fian, the cloud sword fairy of the Yu Palace, while the demonic path had moon-worshipping sect saintess as the most famous. But the strange thing was that the people of the martial arts world had never seen what this saintess looked like. They did not even know how old she was because those who had seen her true appearance were all dead people. But even so, the people of the martial arts world were sure that the appearance of moon-worshipping sect saintess must be extremely beautiful. The reason was very simple. The moon-worshipping sect saintess had to be extremely talented in order to be able to take on the role. At this time, around the moon-worshipping sect saintess, 6 of the 9 great divine magispriests of the moon-worshipping sect had come. 6 powerful martial arts masters were enough to make people breathless. 2 of the top 4 existences of the moon-worshipping sect had come. One could imagine the importance that the moon-worshipping sect attached to this matter. And it was not over yet. Suddenly, a strange sound came from the demonic path side. It sounded like the voice of Buddha, but it contained an evil feeling that made people feel lustful. A middle-aged man in a black kasaya with long hair descended from the sky. 6 different expressions were changing on his face. Some were happy, some were angry, and some were greedy. It was like a mask that changed continuously, and it was incomparably mysterious. Seeing this person, the expressions of Su Du and Su Yen from the Great Light Temple turned serious. This person was the sect leader of the 6th demon sect, Mara-e Bushuan. In terms of reputation, the 6th demon sect on the isolated island in Hainan was not very famous. E Bushuan's reputation was also far from Wei Shuya and Dong Huang Tai's. However, only the people from the Great Light Temple knew how terrifying the 6th demon sect was. They were definitely a formidable opponent of the Great Light Temple. Apart from these few powerhouses, the demonic path had come in full force. The powerhouses of the Rakshasa sect, the 5 Venoms sect, the Omniscient sect, and the other large sects had sent their disciples. Almost every sect had a martial arts master present. There were dozens of martial arts masters on both sides, as well as several powerful existences at the true fire spirit refinement realm. The entire floating jade mountain was like gunpowder that could be ignited by a single spark. Shen Baochen looked at Dong Huang Tai and the others and said calmly, "The demonic path really thinks highly of our 5 major sword sections. They actually sent so many people. Why don't I see Xiaonan? He's an old friend. This time, I want to experience his heaven-mending sutra." Dong Huang Tai said in a low voice, "You don't have the right to see the sect leader. If you want to experience the heaven-mending sutra, you'll have to risk your life to experience it. Shen Baochen, I'll only ask you one thing today. Will the 5 major sword sects hand over the demonic creation flag or not?" Dong Huang Tai's voice was very strange. It was like a muffled drum. His voice was like thunder, echoing. Shen Baochen's lips curled into a smile. "Hand it over? Why should we hand it over? The demonic creation flag was snatched by our 5 major sword sects from the Kunlun devil cult in the past. If you want it, come and get it." Dong Huang Tai took a step forward and said coldly, "It's always been the demonic path that plans in the dark, but this time, it's the 5 major sword sects who initiated the provocation. Floating Jade Mountain has turned into a river of blood. The one to blame is not the demonic path, but the 5 major sword sects." Shen Baochen shook his head. "How can we slay demons and defend justice without bloodshed? However, I believe that the ones who bleed the most on Floating Jade Mountain today will not be the 5 major sword sects, but the demonic path demons like you." With that, Shen Baochen said softly, "Activate the sword array." When the 3 words were spoken, the entire Floating Jade Mountain began to tremble. Instantly, multicolored light shone brightly, and sword chi surged into the sky. Chapter 398. The 5 major sword sects had teamed up to plot against the demonic cultivators. Even if Yi Xiaonan was here, the 5 major sword sects would have more trump cards waiting for them, let alone Yi Xiaonan. As Shen Baochen's voice fell, the entire Floating Jade Mountain was covered in dense array patterns. The strangest thing was that long swords rose into the air. There were tens of thousands of them, and the weakest one of them was a precious weapon. This was Storm Sword Tomb's Immortal Execution Myriad Swords Array. It was called Immortal Execution, but now it was used to suppress the demons. The 5 major sword sects had put in a lot of effort for this. The tens of thousands of precious weapons were almost all gathered by Hidden Sword Villa and Storm Sword Tomb. After all, these 2 sects had the most precious weapons and long swords. When the Immortal Execution Myriad Swords Array was activated, the demonic cultivators near the edge immediately wailed and were immediately killed. In mid-air, the long swords fell like meteors, killing and dismembering the demonic cultivators one by one. When he saw this, Wei Shuya shouted, "Attack!" As Wei Shuya's voice fell, the hidden devil clan cultivators who were originally hidden in the crowd, such as Mr. Lu, all revealed themselves and began to attack the people from the 5 major sword sects. In an instant, they dealt a devastating blow to the cultivators from the 5 major sword sects. In fact, the people from the 5 major sword sects had long been on guard. They also knew that the phaseless demon sect cultivators were good at concealment, and they were most likely hidden in the crowd. However, the people from the 5 major sword sects did not expect that there would be so many people hidden. With the help of the phaseless demon sect, the other hidden devil clan cultivators also disguised themselves to the extreme, so that the people from the 5 major sword sects could not discover them. This caused them to suffer losses and suffer significant losses. The old guard from Storm Sword Tomb did not say anything. He slashed out with the dirty long sword in his hand, bringing with it a powerful sword light that could cut through the heavens and earth. It was dazzling and almost covered the entire floating jade mountain. Wuxia laughed coldly. Demonic chi surged around him, and his palm covered the sky. He grabbed the sword light and tore it apart. As the two of them fought, Dong Huangtai and Yi Bushuan also fought with Du Guli and Shen Baochen respectively. Dong Huangtai didn't have a weapon, but his wide sleeve seemed to be able to cover the sky and contain everything, devouring all of Du Guli's sword aura. Moreover, Dong Huangtai's own cultivation method was very special. It was not a pure demonic cultivation method. Instead, it was mixed with a strand of divinity, just like Chu Xiu's 3 blades of Avicii, which had been cultivated to the extreme. As Dong Huangtai pushed his cultivation method to its limits, the illusory figure of a 100-meter-tall demon god appeared behind him. It had no legs, but its body was huge and its arms were long and narrow. The body condensed from black demonic energy had a pair of deep golden eyes. As the golden light shone, whether it was the power of the world or Du Guli's powerful sword chi, they were all destroyed. As soon as they started fighting, Dong Huangtai had already started to suppress Du Guli. This scene shocked everyone on the scene. The current East Emperor Tai was known as the most powerful among all divine Magispriests, and he was strong enough to stand shoulder to shoulder with the High Priest. Now, it seemed that he deserved his reputation. On the other side, Mara Yi Bushuan was also fighting Shen Baochen with great intensity. The 6th demon sect was far away on an isolated island in Hainan and kept a low profile. They rarely involved themselves with matters related to the Central Plains warriors, so some of the warriors present did not know much about the 6th demon sect. This included Shen Baochen, who was also fighting a warrior from the 6th demon sect for the first time. The demonic energy around Yi Bushuan surged, and wisps of mysterious aura burst forth. He did not fight Shen Baochen head-on at all. He formed a seal with his hands, and the 4 heavens, Wang Tian, Lili Tian, Yama Tian, Tusada Tian, Huala Tian, and Mahasvara Tian appeared. The 6 heavens of the desire realm surrounded Shen Baochen, and they seemed real and illusory at the same time. If Shen Baochen did not pay attention, he would be pulled into them. Although Shen Baochen's cultivation in the way of the sword and his unswerving determination would not cause him to fall into them, he still could not find a way to completely break out of the 6 heavens of the desire realm. This made him feel very depressed. The 6 powerful existences in the true fire spirit refinement realm were fighting, and it seemed that the 5 major sword sects were at a disadvantage. Wuxia fought head-on with the elder of the Windcloud Sword Tomb, and the fight was spectacular. Dong Huangtai was suppressing Du Guli. On the other side, Yi Bushuan's attacks were extremely strange, and he was also entangled with Shen Baochen. In this way, the 5 major sword sects were already in danger. Moreover, the real danger for the 5 major sword sects was not on the side of the high-level cultivators, but on the side of the other cultivators. The 5 major sword sects had indeed made ample preparations this time. The cultivators of the 5 sects had gathered together, and they had the assistance of the immortal extermination myriad swords formation. However, it was a pity that they had to face the entire demonic Tao. There was the extremely powerful moon-worshipping cult, and the low-key but powerful 6th demon sect, as well as the evil extreme sect, 5 poison cult, Rakshasa sect, and other demonic Tao sections. Although these sects did not turn out in full force, each sect had used more than half of their strength, and their power could be said to be astonishing. Moreover, the hidden devil lineage was not weak either. Although they were few in number, they grouped together in 2s and 3s, and used all kinds of strange methods to secretly attack and kill the cultivators of the 5 major sword sects. There were many vicious and merciless demonic Dao villains in the hidden devil lineage. In the past, they would still keep a low profile and endure, but now, they all emerged and began to wantonly kill. Among them, the most outstanding performance was from the moon-worshipping cult. Although the hidden devil lineage did not admit it, among all the demonic Dao sects, there was indeed no demonic Dao sect that could compare to the moon-worshipping cult. And the moon-worshipping cult was the only existence in the demonic Dao that could compete with the Buddhist and Daoist lineages. The saintess of the moon-worshipping cult danced her graceful body. She wore a small silver bell on her wrist, and held an exquisite jade drum in her hand. As she danced and beat it, it produced strange syllables. After hearing the sound, the goo insects around her became even more bloodthirsty and ferocious. Even the cultivators at the unity of heaven and man realm could not resist, and were instantly gnawed into a pile of white bones. There was a martial Dao grandmaster who wanted to deal with the saintess of the moon-worshipping cult first, but she was surrounded by the 6 god magus priests of the moon-worshipping cult. Those were 6 martial Dao grandmasters. Among the 5 major sword sects, the Hidden Sword Villa and the Yu Palace, which were the weakest, did not even have 6 martial Dao grandmasters. How could they fight? The more they fought, the uglier the expressions of the people from the 5 major sword sects became. They had still underestimated the demonic Dao. They had miscalculated. In recent years, the demonic Dao had been suppressed. Other than the powerful sects like the moon-worshipping cult, which could be more at ease, and the sects that were far away from the central plains like the 6th demon sect, which could be more relaxed, the other demonic Dao sects had to tuck their tails between their legs and behave. Sects like the extreme evil sect and the 5 poison sect usually kept a low profile, and the demonic Dao villains of the hidden devil lineage also acted cautiously. Usually, they did not dare to surface at all. Only the scale of the phaseless demon sect dared to come out and cause trouble in the dark. Therefore, the performance of the demonic Dao gave the 5 major sword sects an illusion that the demonic Dao was very weak. It was really weak to the extreme. In the end, the 5 major sword sects realized that a starving camel was still bigger than a horse. When the demonic Dao was really forced into a corner, the powerful strength that they revealed was still shocking. However, the people from the 5 major sword sects were already in a difficult position. The fight had already reached such a stage. What else could they do? Retreat? While Shen Baochen was entangled with Yi Bushuan, he said in a clear voice, "Are you all still going to stand by and watch? The demonic Dao has already become so powerful. Do you all still want to watch another Kunlun devil cult appear in the underworld?" Shen Baochen's words were directed at the warriors from the other sections. In fact, in the beginning, these people did not want to participate in the battle between the 5 major sword sects and the demonic Dao. However, now that they saw the power that the demonic Dao had displayed, these people were filled with fear. They did not believe Shen Baochen's words about another Kunlun devil cult appearing. How could the Kunlun devil cult appear so easily? However, the might displayed by the demonic lineage had indeed exceeded their imagination. It was time to suppress them a little. The battle of orthodoxies in the underworld had always been cruel. The Buddhist and Daoist sects had conflicts with each other. The relationship between the 5 major sword sects and the Buddhist and Daoist sects was not very good. However, in general, they all had the same label, which was that they were orthodox sections. Therefore, now that the demonic Dao had become so powerful, even if it was not for the sake of exterminating demons and protecting the righteous path, they had to act for their own selfish desires. The Great Light Temple was the first to act. In fact, even if Shen Baochen did not say it, the Great Light Temple was prepared to act. There were 2 reasons. One was that the Great Light Temple had an extremely strong enmity towards the demonic Dao, and the other was that there were people from the 6th demon sect among the people who came this time. The martial arts of the Buddhist lineage had a natural restraining effect on the demonic Dao martial artists, and the martial arts of the 6th demon sect was a strong restraint on the Buddhist lineage. Therefore, the Great Light Temple saw the 6th demon sect martial artists as a thorn in their side. It was fine if they did not see them, but when they did, they naturally had to act. With the Great Light Temple taking the lead, other than the unaffiliated martial artists who were still somewhat wavering, the rest of the orthodox sects almost all joined the battle and began to kill the demonic Dao martial artists. Seeing this, a faint smile appeared at the corner of Shen Baochun's mouth. The strength of the demonic Dao was something that Shen Baochun and the other people from the 5 major sword sects did not expect. However, since they had acted, they certainly had more than one set of preparations. The martial artists who came to watch the ceremony were also part of their preparations. There was strength in numbers. This was the truth no matter where it was. Although the 5 major sword sects were very confident, they were still prepared to pull the other sects into the fray. If the 5 major sword sects won, these people could serve as spectators to show the might of the 5 major sword sects. On the contrary, if there were any changes to the plan, these people could also be used as external help. After all, the orthodox and demonic sects could not coexist. At this time and in this kind of situation, no sect would dare to hold back and not act. This was only a backup plan of the 5 major sword sects. They did not expect that an accident would really happen. They had no choice but to use the power of the martial artists present. Chapter 399. The process of the World Sword Sect Conference turning into a war between the righteous and demonic sects on floating Jade Mountain was as simple as that. As the other righteous sects attacked, the entire floating Jade Mountain was like a meat grinder. People were being killed almost every second. It was extremely cruel. However, the 5 major sword sects finally managed to turn the tables. However, on the side of the true fire spirit refinement stage powerhouse, Duguli had been suppressed by Dongwang Tai to the point where he could barely breathe. The king of Jiannan, Duguli, was once a powerhouse who dominated the pugilistic world. He was once a madman who dared to attack the northern Yan alone to demand an explanation. The fact that Duguli was still alive was enough to prove his talent and strength. However, it was a pity that Duguli had encountered Dongwang Tai, who was even more talented and stronger than him. The demonic gods, I could destroy all living things. Such an evil martial art was something that Duguli had no way of dealing with. No matter how strong his sword Dao was, it was destroyed by the Eastern Emperor Tai's demonic god's golden eye. Dongwang Tai closed in casually. He raised his wide, black sleeves and floated in midair. As his wide sleeves pressed down, it was as if half of floating Jade Mountain had entered his sleeves. The sky suddenly darkened. Duguli immediately felt a strong pressure coming from all directions. He had no time to think. The long sword in his hand spun and wisps of golden flames were released. Sword chi burned in the air. Sky-burning sword technique. However, before Duguli could fully display the sky-burning sword technique, an explosion came from around him. A majestic demonic aura seemed to have appeared out of thin air and pressed him into the ground. The entire floating Jade Mountain trembled and a crack appeared on the mountain. A martial arts grandmaster could split a river with a single sword and shatter a mountain with a single punch. Although it was only a small mountain that was shattered, the power of a martial arts grandmaster was already terrifying enough. The floating Jade Mountain was huge. Even if more than 10 martial Dao masters attacked it together, they would not be able to shatter it. However, now that there were 6 existences at the level of Dongwang Tai, it did not seem difficult for them to completely shatter the entire floating Jade Mountain. Duguli, who was smashed into the ground, spat out a mouthful of blood. His eyes were filled with shock. Ever since he had been seriously injured in the northern Yan, Duguli had rarely fought. Therefore, it had been a long time since he had experienced the taste of being seriously injured. Now, he had finally tasted it again. Dongwang Tai stepped forward, wanting to kill Duguli once and for all. However, at that moment, the tomb keeper who had been paying attention to the battle suddenly shouted, "Bring out the abyssal sword." As soon as he finished speaking, Yan Ji, who had been fighting with the 6th heavenly demon sect's martial artist, immediately retreated. He bit his finger and pressed it against his forehead. In an instant, a golden light bloomed and the ground of the arena beneath him split open. A pitch-black longsword rose from the cracked ground. Although it was called a longsword, the longsword's appearance was very strange. It was like an incomplete sword embryo. The blade and hilt of the sword were both black iron in color. Even the blade was crooked and unsharpened. However, this longsword carried an incomparably ferocious aura. Only the heavens knew how much slaughter this sword had been stained with. This sword was the peerless sword of the Storm Sword Mound, the murderous weapon abyssal. Ranked 6th in the world-famous sword manual, the murderous weapon abyssal. According to the legends, the murderous weapon abyssal wasn't forged by man. Instead, it was born on an island in the North Sea in a bottomless abyss. Its original form was an iron rod made of an unknown material. However, it was extremely sturdy. Not only could it contain any type of chi, but it could also absorb the power of heaven and earth. It could be called a rare treasure. However, ever since this iron rod was brought out, it seemed to have a curse on it. Anyone who possessed it would die a violent death. The iron rod was also stained with countless amounts of blood. Later on, it was obtained by a grandmaster sword crafting master. That grandmaster sword crafting master refined it into a sword as if he had obtained a priceless treasure. However, because the material was too sturdy, it was very difficult to refine. That grandmaster sword crafting master spent a lot of effort to forge it into a sword embryo. However, before he could truly start refining it, that grandmaster sword crafting master was already killed. However, at this time, although the murderous abyss was still a sword embryo, it had already taken shape. Moreover, because the sword was stained with countless amounts of blood, the murderous chi on the murderous abyss was extremely dense. Anyone who obtained it would be affected by it and become a madman who only knew how to kill. Moreover, at this time, everyone knew the special characteristics of the murderous abyss. Not only could it absorb the power of heaven and earth, it could also absorb the chi and blood of martial artists as nourishment. Sometimes, if its owner did not kill enough, the murderous abyss would even affect its owner, forcing them to go on a killing spree. With this kind of behavior, the murderous abyss could already be said to be a murderous weapon among murderous weapons. The last master of the murderous abyss had died at the hands of Storm Sword Mound. The murderous abyss had also been suppressed by the people of Storm Sword Mound using the powerful sword intent of the land of buried swords. In all these years, the number of times that Storm Sword Mound had used the murderous abyss could be counted on one's fingers. Normally, unless it was a critical moment, they would not be willing to use the murderous abyss. After all, a murderous weapon was a murderous weapon. It was something that harmed others as well as oneself. Using the murderous abyss was not a good thing for the user as it would harm their chi and blood. Moreover, if an accident happened and caused the murderous abyss to go out of control, it would cause unimaginable losses. This time, the 5 great sword sects were also serious. Before setting up the trap, Storm Sword Mound had already brought the murderous abyss with them. However, they did not want to use it. But looking at the situation now, if they did not use the murderous abyss, the 5 great sword sects would not be able to hold on much longer. Yanji used his blood as a guide to activate the murderous abyss. In an instant, the murderous abyss exploded with a terrifying murderous power. The crimson power dyed the pitch-black murderous abyss red. In the blink of an eye, the murderous abyss that was suspended in mid-air disappeared. However, in the next moment, it had already appeared in front of Dong Huang Tai. Dong Huang Tai's wide sleeves danced and his body turned into a black mist. The murderous abyss flashed through the black mist. It did not hurt Dong Huang Tai, but it completely shattered the demonic shadow behind him. A strange look appeared in Dong Huang Tai's eyes. Murderous abyss? Your storm sword mound has prepared quite well this time. Unfortunately, no matter how strong a weapon is, it is still a dead object. You want to turn the tide with a single weapon of death? Dream on. As soon as he finished speaking, demonic aura surged around Dong Huang Tai. His entire person disappeared within the boundless demonic aura. The majestic demonic aura covered the sky, almost enveloping the entire floating jade mountain within it. Once true fire and spirit ascension realm cultivators fought, their power was simply terrifying. After this battle, the entire floating jade mountain would probably be destroyed by them. The cultivators of both the righteous and demonic sides were engaged in a fierce battle. At this moment, Chu Xiu was slacking off. At a time like this, Chu Xiu would not be so idiotic as to reveal his identity. He had to make good use of his identity as a member of the righteous and demonic sections. Before this, Mr. Lu had already sent a voice transmission to Chu Xiu, asking him to use this opportunity to help him get rid of someone. Chu Xiu had also agreed. After all, he did not like that guy very much. That person was Mr. Shan Yin of the Five Venoms sect, Wuxia Xianxia. The Five Venoms sect seemed to have some conflicts with the Phaseless Demon sect, and Wuxia Xianxia was also an old enemy of Mr. Lu. Previously, during the Demonic Alliance conference, both sides had fought. However, at that time, Chu Xiu had to hide his identity, so he could not kill. Moreover, with so many demonic cultivators present, Chu Xiu could not kill. Now was the perfect time. Although right now was the time for the demonic sects to join forces to fight against the righteous sects, and Chu Xiu killing one of his own was somewhat unethical, neither Chu Xiu nor Mr. Lu felt guilty. Whether Chu Xiu, who was pretending to be a rising star of the demonic sects, counted as a member of the demonic sects or not, even Chu Xiu himself could not be sure. However, right now, this identity was advantageous to Chu Xiu, so Chu Xiu was prepared to continue pretending. As for Mr. Lu, he had wanted to kill Wuxia Xianxia for a long time. The Five Venoms sect was backed by the moon-worshipping sect, and they had found such a big backer by being a dog for the moon-worshipping sect. This made the people of the Phaseless Demon sect very unhappy. Now that they had gotten rid of Wuxia Xianxia, they could at least vent their anger. So in the chaotic battle between both sides, Chu Xiu fought and retreated, and finally found Wuxia Xianxia's figure. At this time, Wuxia Xianxia was very happy killing. The martial arts of the Five Venoms sect were very useful in this kind of chaotic battle. Once the Five Venoms true chi was released, it would immediately affect a large number of people. He would kill whoever was poisoned the most. Some of the poisonous insects in his body needed to be fed with blood. Usually, he did not have the chance, and did not have the guts to kill so many righteous martial artists to feed his poisonous insects. This time, Wuxia Xianxia had gotten back what he had lost. At this time, Wuxia Xianxia was surrounded by poisonous mist as he chased a Ba Mountain Sword Sect 5 Chis towards the source martial artist. The Ba Mountain Sword Sect martial artist was about to collapse. He had clearly come to participate in the World Sword Sect Conference. How did this place become a battlefield in the blink of an eye, and everyone started to kill? This martial artist did not understand, so he could only run for his life. In the outside world, a 5 Chis towards the source martial artist could be called an expert, but in a place like this, even a martial arts grandmaster could not escape unscathed, much less a 5 Chis towards the source martial artist. Just as Wuxia Xianxia was about to reach the Ba Mountain Sword Sect martial artist, a golden handprint fell down, and instantly defeated all the poisonous insects and goo in front of him. Chu Xiu's figure blocked in front of Wuxia Xianxia. This caused Wuxia Xianxia and the 5 Chis towards the source martial artist to be stunned. The Ba Mountain Sword Sect martial artist did not seem to think that the one who saved him was Chu Xiu, who had some enmity with the Ba Mountain Sword Sect. Had Chu Xiu changed his personality? He did not seem to be as bad as the sect said. As for Wuxia Xianxia, he felt that Chu Xiu was somewhat familiar. While Chu Xiu had attacked many times on the stage, because of the distance, Wuxia Xianxia did not pay much attention. But now, he truly felt that Chu Xiu's presence was somewhat familiar. Chapter 400. The Ba Mountain Sword Sect warrior was shocked by Chu Xiu's help. Thinking of how he and the others had wanted to make trouble for Chu Xiu before, the Ba Mountain Sword Sect warrior could not help but feel ashamed. The warrior bowed to Chu Xiu in a grateful and guilty tone. "Thank you, Master Chu, for not holding grudges against us and saving us." Chu Xiu waved his hand and put on a righteous and magnanimous expression. "I do have some grievances with the Ba Mountain Sword Sect, but those are personal grievances. You and I are both righteous warriors. Facing these murderers of the demonic path, we should put down our past grievances and work together against the enemy. The Ba Mountain Sword Sect warrior nodded fiercely upon hearing this. His gaze towards Chu Xiu changed slightly. The rumors in the Jianghu had always said that Chu Xiu was too vicious and heartless, and did not seem like someone of the righteous path. But now, it seemed that this Master Chu could still distinguish between righteousness and personal grievances. He was definitely not as bad as the rumors said. At this time, Cho Xiangzi did not have the mind to consider why he found Chu Xiu familiar. Cho Xiangzi sneered and said, "Chu Xiu, your Guanzhong torture room is not of the righteous path, and belongs to a neutral faction. The battle on Floating Jade Mountain has nothing to do with you, but you insist on interfering. Do you want to die?" Chu Xiu took a step forward and said righteously, "Who says the Guanzhong torture room is not of the righteous path? Everyone is responsible for the rise and fall of the world. The safety of the righteous path must be shouldered by us. You murderers of the demonic path are so arrogant. I think you are the ones who want to die." Chu Xiu's words were righteous as though he really was a hero of the righteous path. Cho Xiangzi sneered when he heard this. The 5 poison genuine qi around his body erupted. Amidst the colorful poisonous mist, there were also ear-piercing cries of insects. Surprisingly, there were many evil poisonous insects hidden in the poisonous mist. Cho Xiangzi had seen Chu Xiu fight before, but at that time, the demonic path had not completely invaded Floating Jade Mountain. As the hidden devil sect, the 5 poison sect, of course, would not be able to see it clearly like Mr. Lu and the others. Cho Xiangzi was watching from a big tree on the cliff. Because of the distance, he couldn't feel how strong Chu Xiu's power was. It was very vague. Cho Xiangzi couldn't even see the details of his attack. At most, he could only see the final result. However, in his opinion, Chu Xiu was not at the level of Feng Qi Shao. He was only at the 5 qis collecting in the origin realm. Even if he was strong, how strong could he be? With this thought in mind, Cho Xiangzi did not even use his full strength. He only used 80% of it. Of course, he did not waste the other 20% of his strength. Instead, he was constantly paying attention to the movements around him, afraid that someone would sneak up on him. Although the people fighting the demonic path were all disciples of the righteous path, they were all warriors. Putting aside their own orthodoxy, who would not be more vicious than the other? At that moment, Chu Xiu took a step forward, and his figure actually merged into the poisonous mist. Before Cho Xiangzi could mock Chu Xiu for courting death, a blinding Buddhist light had already bloomed in the poisonous mist, tearing it apart and shattering the poisonous insects. Buddhist martial arts again. Seeing this scene, Cho Xiangzi was so angry that he wanted to vomit blood. He was not weak in the 5 poisons sect. In terms of cultivation, Cho Xiangzi was almost half a step into the Grandmaster realm. Few warriors of the same level could beat him. However, now that he had met his nemesis, Cho Xiangzi felt very helpless. He had already deliberately avoided the group of monks from the Great Light Temple, but he did not expect that he would meet someone who was leading the way and was also using Buddhist martial arts. At the thought of this, Cho Xiangzi subconsciously thought of the detestable kid called Lin Yi that Lu Jin had brought. That guy also seemed to be proficient in Buddhist martial arts. However, before Cho Xiangzi could think further, Chu Xiu had already conjured the Great Vajra will seal and attacked Cho Xiangzi repeatedly. Previously at the demonic path meeting, because Chu Xiu needed to hide his identity, he did not use his signature fast and slow 9 words formula. Instead, he only used the Great Vajra superpower that he had just learned. Although the few Dharma forms formed by the Great Vajra superpower were not weak, they were not as handy as the fast and slow 9 words formula. For example, Chu Xiu used the glazed golden silk goo to restrain the poisonous goo and the Buddhist martial arts to restrain Cho Xiangzi. A series of attacks directly suppressed Cho Xiangzi to the extreme. The more Cho Xiangzi fought, the more aggrieved he felt. His cultivation was actually considered to be half a step into the martial Dao Grandmaster realm, at least in terms of using poison. Warriors of the same level who were one with heaven and man would be afraid of his poison techniques and would be restrained when fighting him. However, Chu Xiu seemed to be immune to all poisons. Zhou Xiangzi's poison techniques could not do anything to him at all. Therefore, when he felt that he had been suppressed to the extreme, Zhou Xiangzi made a prompt decision to immediately escape and let the others deal with Chu Xiu. There were so many righteous experts on floating Jade Mountain. Zhou Xiangzi could go and kill others to gain credit. There was no need for him to fight to the death with Chu Xiu here. However, since Chu Xiu had the intention to kill, how could he let Zhou Xiangzi leave so easily? Just as Zhou Xiangzi was about to retreat, Chu Xiu formed the lion's seal with his hand. In an instant, a thunderous explosion was heard, causing Zhou Xiangzi's body to tremble. He could not help but grunt, and a ruthless look appeared in his eyes. Since Chu Xiu was unwilling to let him off, then he wanted to see who would be the one to die in the end. As a demonic martial artist from the Five Poison sect, Zhou Xiangzi's personality was naturally cruel and ruthless. He had wanted to retreat earlier only because he realized that Chu Xiu was proficient in Buddhist martial arts and would be at a disadvantage if he fought him. However, since Chu Xiu was persistent, he would use his trump card and see who would emerge victorious in the end. The moment he turned around, Zhou Xiangzi blasted out with both palms and a large amount of poisonous fog erupted, meeting Chu Xiu's great Vajra seal. There was an explosion of Buddhist light, and Zhou Xiangzi's poisonous fog was completely shattered. However, at this moment, two palm-sized golden snakes rushed out of the poisonous fog and attacked Chu Xiu. The two palm-sized golden snakes were extremely fast and arrived in front of Chu Xiu in almost an instant. Chu Xiu formed the Dugu seal with his hand, but the strange thing was that the two snakes completely ignored Chu Xiu's Gang Qi defense and continued to attack him. Frowning, Chu Xiu raised the heavenly demon dance in his hand as he retreated. However, the astral blade demonic qi had almost no effect on the two golden snakes. With two clangs, the two golden snakes were sent flying by Chu Xiu, but there was only a white mark on their bodies. The attack from a sixth transformation treasure weapon had little effect on them. Zhou Xiangzi couldn't help but sneer when he saw this. These two golden snakes were a mutated species he found in the mountains of Miaojiang. They were called Little Vajra snakes. They were impervious to Gang Qi and 100 weapons. Although they were not ferocious beasts, they had all kinds of strange powers. However, feeding these Little Vajra snakes was too difficult. They only ate bone marrow, and it was the bone marrow of martial artists. The stronger the better. Even if Zhou Xiangzi killed people every day, he couldn't afford to feed them. Most of the time, he let the two Little Vajra snakes sleep temporarily and only used them at critical moments. Although Zhou Xiangzi would have to kill people everywhere to find bone marrow to feed these two Little Vajra snakes, it was worth it as long as he could kill Chu Xiu. It must be known that although Chu Xiu was not a big shot of the righteous sects, he was still one of the top 10 elites on the Longhu list. Killing him would be a great credit. The two Little Vajra snakes pounced on Chu Xiu again under the command of Zhou Xiangzi's Gang Qi. But this time, Chu Xiu did not move. The power of the soul-shifting technique of extinguishing heaven and extinguishing earth erupted. In an instant, the two Little Vajra snakes were bleeding from their mouths and noses. They twitched for a while and then stopped moving. These things were not afraid of Gang Qi and were impervious to 100 weapons. Could it be that their mental strength was so strong? Zhou Xiangzi's heart was bleeding at the sight of this. Back then, for the sake of these two Little Vajra snakes, Zhou Xiangzi risked being chased by righteous martial artists to kill them and extract their bone marrow. Only then did he manage to feed them and keep them alive. But now, they both died in the hands of Chu Xiu. Chu Xiu! I will kill you. Zhou Xiangzi roared and took the initiative to attack Chu Xiu. However, although Zhou Xiangzi was angry, he was not an idiot. He was not good at close combat, so he would not fight to the death with Chu Xiu. After approaching Chu Xiu, a scarlet blood light burst out of Zhou Xiangzi's sleeve and went straight for Chu Xiu. The scarlet blood light looked like sword qi, but upon a closer look, it was actually a ferocious blood-colored centipede the size of a dagger and a foot long. This thing was called the Thousand Poison Blood Centipede. It was a secret poisonous insect refined by the Five Poisons Order. It was fed with blood essence and supported by countless poisonous creatures. During this period, the Thousand Poison Blood Centipede could not die. Although the Thousand Poison Blood Centipede refined by Wuxia Xianxia did not really reach 10,000 kinds of poison, it still had thousands of kinds. Its power was very strong. It could not be said to kill upon contact. The Thousand Poison Blood Centipede had not been completely refined by Wuxia Xianxia. Using it now would affect the growth of the Thousand Poison Blood Centipede. However, at this moment, he hated Chu Xiu to the extreme, so he couldn't care about anything else. This time, he had to kill Chu Xiu. However, before the Thousand Poison Blood Centipede could reach him, Wuxia Xianxia's eyes widened in disbelief. The Thousand Poison Blood Centipede, which he regarded as his last base, was easily clamped between two fingers by Chu Xiu. The ferocious Thousand Poison Blood Centipede was like a weak little insect in Chu Xiu's hands. It was actually trembling there. As Chu Xiu's fingers moved slightly, the Thousand Poison Blood Centipede was directly split into two by Chu Xiu's gang qi. No! Wuxia Xianxia roared angrily, but it was too late. It should be said that Wuxia Xianxia's decision to use these poisonous creatures and goo worms to deal with Chu Xiu was a mistake. The glazed gold silk goo in Chu Xiu's body had an innate suppressive effect on all kinds of poisonous creatures and goo worms. Unless the goo worm's level was higher than the glazed gold silk goo, these poisonous creatures and goo worms were all trash in front of Chu Xiu. Chapter 401. Mr. Liu had previously told Chu Xiu that the Five Poison sect basically followed the lead of moon-worshipping sect. In the past, Chu Xiu had thought that it was only because the Five Poison sect was too close to moon-worshipping sect. Now, it seemed that there was more to it. Moon-worshipping sect was also good at refining goo, but unlike the Five Poison sect, which only refined poison goo, they refined other higher-level goo worms, just like the glazed golden thread goo in Chu Xiu's body. Refining goo was only a branch of moon-worshipping sect's cultivation method, and could only be regarded as a support. The true moon-worshipping sect's martial artists mainly cultivated extremely powerful demonic techniques. So in this way, moon-worshipping sect's martial artists could completely suppress the Five Poison sect. It was no wonder that the Five Poison sect was so respectful to moon-worshipping sect. At this time, Chu Xiu was facing Wuxia Xianxia in the same way, completely suppressing him to the point where he could not breathe. Wuxia Xianxia had completely lost the will to fight, but unfortunately, Chu Xiu did not want to give him another chance to escape. The great Vajra will seal came crashing down, and several seals directly hit Wuxia Xianxia until he vomited blood. However, the more Wuxia Xianxia fought, the more familiar he felt with Chu Xiu. After all, one's appearance could be changed, but a person's habits in battle could not be changed. Others might not be able to sense this, but Wuxia Xianxia could be said to be a wily old fox in the pugilistic world. He had fought in the pugilistic world for decades, and his combat experience was very rich. Wuxia Xianxia suddenly thought of something. It seemed that during the Demonic Alliance meeting, when he fought with Lin Yi, he did not use his trump card goo worms, but his goo worms were also ineffective against the other party. Wuxia Xianxia looked at Chu Xiu, and his eyes widened in shock. You are, however, before he could finish his sentence, he saw Chu Xiu's hand shine brightly, and the dazzling Buddhist light condensed all the power in Chu Xiu's body and came crashing down. Perfect Aquarius seal. A loud sound rang out. Wuxia Xianxia's heart meridian was directly smashed by Chu Xiu's Aquarius seal of perfection. Wuxia Xianxia would never be able to say his last sentence. Chu Xiu raised his eyebrows and stepped over Wuxia Xianxia's corpse. He exchanged glances with Mr. Liu, and the two of them avoided the crowd without batting an eyelid, heading towards a dark corner of the periphery to hide together. The death of Wuxia Xianxia did not attract too much attention. After all, this was the battlefield of the righteous and demonic factions. Not to mention Wuxia Xianxia, a martial artist at the unity of heaven and man realm. Even if a martial Dao grandmaster died, no one would pay attention to it at all. At that moment, Chu Xiu and Mr. Lu were hiding behind a huge rock at the edge of floating Jade Mountain. Chu Xiu had changed his clothes and put on a mask. Mr. Lu chuckled and said, "Well done. That old bastard Wuxia Xianxia is very disgusting. I've long wanted to kill him, but I never had the chance. Now that he has sacrificed himself for the demonic path, I believe the people of the Five Poisons sect will erect a memorial arch for him." After saying that, Mr. Lu looked at Chu Xiu and said, "You're also going to kill someone?" "Kill who?" Chu Xiu had already sent a voice transmission to Mr. Lu, asking him to cooperate with him to kill someone. Now that Chu Xiu had two identities, he could fish in troubled waters in the battlefield of the righteous and demonic factions. It could even be said that as long as Chu Xiu did not act so arrogantly as to approach a martial Dao Grand Master, basically no martial artist of the same level could do anything to him. Chu Xiu narrowed his eyes and said, "Of course I'm going to kill Nie Donglu and Xiahou Wujiang. These two guys are very annoying and have caused me a lot of trouble. Although it's never too late for a gentleman to take revenge, I want to take revenge now." There was no need to talk about Nie Donglu. In the past, when Chu Xiu was hunted down, even if Nie Donglu wanted to reconcile, Chu Xiu would not agree. After all, Chu Xiu was not broad-minded. Xiahou Wujiang was also like a fly, stirring up trouble every now and then, which also made Chu Xiu want to kill him. Mr. Lu nodded and looked at the battlefield, frowned and said, "Who do you want to kill first?" "It's a bit troublesome to kill Nie Donglu first. This guy is really cunning, slacking off behind a group of martial Dao Grand Masters. It's a bit difficult to kill him." This time, there were no martial Dao Grand Master level experts coming to the morgue. After all, Nie Renlong was the only martial Dao Grand Master in the entire morgue. It was not appropriate for him to leave the morgue for such a long time, so only some unity of heaven and man realm martial artists followed Nie Donglu. But Nie Donglu was smart because he knew how to take advantage of the situation. The morgue was very famous in northern Yen, and Nie Renlong had a wide network of friends. This time, almost all the northern Yen martial Dao Grand Masters were friends with Nie Renlong. It was very safe for Nie Donglu to follow behind them, and he could also take the opportunity to kill some demonic martial artists who were not as strong as him, accumulating his own reputation. Now it was a bit difficult for Chu Xiu to kill Nie Donglu, unless he got rid of all of Nie Donglu's people. Although Chu Xiu was considered a rising star of the hidden devil lineage, he still had some face. However, it was clear that his face was not that big. So, Chu Xiu directly looked at Xiahou Wujiang and said, "Let's get rid of Xiahou Wujiang first. If there's a chance later, then we'll deal with Nie Donglu." Xiahou Wujiang was actually following behind Xiahou Zhen, but Xiahou Zhen was alone. Xiahou Wujiang was fighting with those devil Dao martial artists under the protection of his father, which could also be considered as accumulating experience. Mr. Lu narrowed his eyes and said, "This is easy to deal with, let's do it." As his voice fell, Mr. Lu left first to inform the martial Dao Grand Masters of the Phaseless Demon Sect. Of course, he couldn't deal with Xiahou Zhen, a martial Dao Grand Master, so he still needed the experts of the Phaseless Demon Sect to come. This time, the martial Dao Grand Masters of the Phaseless Demon Sect were also not few, and one of them was the Shade Demon Envoy, Situ Li, who fought at the Divine Weapon Conference. This martial Dao Grand Master also had a grudge against the martial artists of the Hidden Sword Villa, and at this time, he was staring at the martial artists of the Hidden Sword Villa. After receiving the news from Mr. Lu, Situ Li's eyes showed a touch of surprise, and directly changed his opponent, attacking Xiahou Zhen. Situ Li also knew about Chu Xiu's matter, and even many people in the entire Phaseless Demon Sect knew about it, so they didn't object to Mr. Lu befriending and helping Chu Xiu. The Phaseless Demon Sect had a good reputation in the Hidden Devil Clan over the years. Now that the number of people in the Hidden Devil Clan was decreasing, it had already begun to wither. At this time, it was very worthwhile for the Phaseless Demon sect to make friends with a young elite who came from the direct line of descent of the Devil clan. Moreover, with the strength that Chu Xiu had displayed, it was worth it for the Phaseless Demon sect to invest. The most important thing was that Chu Xiu was discovered by Mr. Lu, and Mr. Lu's position in the Phaseless Demon sect was far higher than Chu Xiu imagined. In the past, Mr. Lu was already an elite disciple of the Phaseless Demon sect when he was young, and now that he had stepped into the half-step Grandmaster realm, becoming a martial Dao Grandmaster was only a matter of time. Therefore, in the Phaseless Demon sect, the weight of Mr. Lu's words could basically be used as half a martial Dao Grandmaster. At this time, Xiahozhen didn't pay attention to what was happening around him. He was fighting with a group of people in the crowd, but he still retained some strength. This matter was mainly caused by the 5 major sword sects, so naturally, the 5 major sword sects should be the main force. Although they could make a move, there was no need to fight to the death. Therefore, Xiahozhen usually only exchanged a few blows with those demonic martial artists, and then immediately escaped, not entangled with them at all. As for those demonic martial artists, they also had a lot of enemies, so they wouldn't entangle with Xiahozhen endlessly. However, at this moment, a dense demonic chi suddenly attacked. Xiahozhen's spirit shone with a golden light, drawing the power of heaven and earth to condense into a shield beside him. With a loud bang, the demonic chi dissipated, and Xiahozhen's spirit shield also shattered. Xiahozhen turned his head and looked, and Situli was staring at him with a sneer. The Phaseless Demon sect's Shade Demon envoy, Situli, was still very famous. Xiahozhen also knew him, but there was no enmity between the two sides, nor was there any conflict. Of course, now that the righteous and demonic sects on Floating Jade Mountain were fighting, even if there was no conflict in the past, it was very normal for both sides to fight during the war between the righteous and demonic sections. Just as Xiahozhen was about to say something, Situli rushed towards him again. His hands formed a seal, and in an instant, monstrous demonic chi enveloped Xiahozhen, turning into a world of bliss that pulled Xiahozhen into it. There were fairies dancing on the upper level, and there were hellish ghosts constantly howling below. It was extremely evil, and it wore down Xiahozhen's spirit. This was the Phaseless Demon sect's Sky Demon Formless technique. Situli's Sky Demon Formless technique was closer to a spiritual attack, and it just so happened that Xiahozhen was also good in this aspect. Looking at the dancing fairies and ghosts around him, Xiahozhen sneered. His body shone with a golden light, and the power of his soul turned into a long sword, directly shattering the world of bliss in front of him. However, Situli did not retreat. Instead, he slammed his palm down, and the monstrous demonic chi roared as he fought with Xiahozhen. The more Xiahozhen fought, the more he felt that something was wrong. Just what kind of grudge did he have with Situli? Why was he pestering him like this, as if he wanted to fight to the death with him? This time, it was the 5 sword sects that wanted to slap the demonic sects in the face. The Fortune Demon flag was also in their hands. Even if Situli wanted to fight to the death, he should fight the 5 sword sections. Why was he fighting him? As he fought, Xiahozhen said coldly, "Situli, my Xiahou clan doesn't seem to have offended you, right?" Situli let out a strange laugh and said, "Since your Xiahou clan is standing on the side of the righteous sects, you have offended me. The righteous and demonic sects are irreconcilable. You are already standing on the side of the 5 sword sects to kill us evil sects, and now you still expect me to hold back?" As soon as he finished speaking, Situli attacked Xiahozhen again, looking like he had to fight to the death with Xiahozhen. Secretly cursing Situli for being a lunatic, Xiahozhen had no choice but to bite the bullet and continue attacking. At this time, the masked Chu Xiu appeared behind Xiahou Wujiang. With a cold look in his eyes, he slammed his fist down, and demonic killing intent gathered. You're tuning into the Carefree Valley YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.